Chapter 142. The great Buddha attacked with all his strength, and his fists were exceptionally ferocious, and Susanoo was forced to retreat again and again. The tyrannical strength made Susanoo constantly forced to retreat, and Dustless on top of his head was also trembling. Kacha, looking up, Susanoo's left shoulder was broken by brute force, exposed to the erosion of the air. The uneven wounds looked like they were bitten by a fierce beast, very hideous. If this hits a person... Dustless took a deep breath, his eyes widened, and the horror was not hidden at all. Looking at the huge fist on Susanoo's shoulder, he couldn't help but feel a chill. If this hit a person, I'm afraid anyone would die. It seems that Susanoo can't do anything to him. Sighing, Dustless's ultimate form Susanoo was strong, but compared with the giant Buddha opposite, it was like a small child in front of a big one. There was no comparison at all. The Kyuubi with Susanoo was not as strong as the giant Buddha, not to mention that Dustless is now a pure Susanoo, and there is no Kyuubi. You have successfully angered me, Senju Hashirama. Lowering his head, Dustless looked at Hashirama with a gloomy face, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. People who anger me don't have a good end. The Tensigen in his right eye suddenly rippled. Dustless removed the ultimate form Susanoo covering his body, and a brilliant golden light flashed in his hand, full of the feeling of invincibility. I have already seen your dismembered body. As his voice fell, the golden light in his hand became even more resplendent. His cold and lonely face was filled with a ferocious look. The smell of blood drifting in the air was dense and pungent. The golden light extended without limit, turning into an endless beam of light that swept over. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! A sharp piercing sound rang out. Raising his head, he saw a slender golden ray of light wreaking havoc like a hurricane. It was impossible to calculate how long the ray of light was. Bastard, there's no way to hide in such a large area. Staring at the golden light coming from the side, Hashirama snorted. His face was extremely ugly. Dustless's Susanoo wasn't good at moving, and his technique was the same. He couldn't avoid it. The larger a creature was, the harder it was for them to move as nimbly as humans. Their body size was a disadvantage to them. Of course, there were no absolutes in this world, and there was no lack of special existences. Pucci. At a glance, the golden light pierced through the Buddha's body. The huge Buddha statue was penetrated by the golden light. In the center, one could clearly see the crack that split the statue into two. What a terrifying technique. Seeing this scene, Hashirama's face was even more serious. A technique that could defeat the most powerful technique of Mokuton, and it was so easy to defeat it. It could no longer be looked at with ordinary eyes. He looked at the golden light that whistled past him. It should be a ninjutsu that humans could not touch. Now is not the time for you to be surprised. Dustless appeared behind Hashirama like a ghost. He held a black iron rod in his hand. This was a combination of his will. It was condensed from the yin-yang release. Whoosh! The black iron rod swept out with full force, and it went straight to the back of Hashirama. Pucci. Hashirama's abdomen was immediately penetrated by the black rod, and the chakra that erupted from his body suddenly decreased. This strange black rod seemed to be able to absorb chakra, and it bound Hashirama's chakra. This, Hashirama, who was already dead, naturally could not feel the so-called pain. He looked at the black iron rod that penetrated his body, and felt that his chakra was restricted. His eyes flashed with understanding. Is this the yin-yang release? The body's acupuncture points are sealed. Pucci. Several black iron rods entered his body. Hashirama helplessly found that not to mention mobilizing chakra, even the minimum movement was completely sealed. The strength of his body was drained, and he could only kneel on the ground. Who are you? Not only do you have Rinnegan, but you also have Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and your right eye seems to be not simple. Turning his head, Hashirama questioned Dustless, who was walking over. Looking at the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, he could not help but frown. He was sure that the dark blue eye was definitely not weaker than Rinnegan. As expected of the god of ninja, Hashirama, you can see the extraordinariness of the Tensigen at a glance. Looking at Hashirama, Dustless smiled with relief. Tensigen is the eye that only Otsutsuki Himura, the younger brother of the Rakuto Sannin, can have. In fact, it is the same level of I as Rinnegan, but Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, while Tensegan is more in pursuit of absolute destruction. Dustless didn't hide anything in his tone. Anyway, there was nothing to hide for a person like Hashirama who was about to die. No wonder. Remembering that the golden light just destroyed his Buddha, Hashirama was relieved. Staring at Dustless's spiral mask, he asked in a deep voice, "It seems that your origin is not simple. You have my cells in your body." In fact, Hashirama had long known that Dustless had his cells in his body, but he didn't have time to say it before the fight. Now that Dustless was so close to him, he felt it more clearly. Dustless chuckled when he heard this and replied faintly, "The God of the world wants peace, divided into yin and yang. Two forces repel each other and become one, giving birth to all things in the world." "How do you know this?" Hashirama heard this and immediately looked at Dustless with uncertainty. Uchiha Madara once said these words to him, but so far he didn't understand what it meant. "You will know what I mean soon." With a cold smile on his face, Dustless stretched his hands forward and grabbed Hashirama's neck. His whole body was like a black hole absorbing Hashirama's Senjutsu chakra. Chapter 143. Hashirama looked at Dustless in confusion. He really didn't understand the meaning of these words. After Uchiha Madara said these words to him, he left Konoha without understanding it. A few years later, he started the war that destroyed Konoha. Aware that the Senjutsu chakra in his body was continuously absorbing, Hashirama wanted to resist, but the black iron rod inserted behind him couldn't make him use any power. Not to mention using ninjutsu. Even standing up was extremely difficult. "This is your Senjutsu chakra, there is nothing special about it." After feeling the Senjutsu chakra pouring into his body, Dustless carefully tasted it and whispered indifferently, "Although the power of chakra is extremely great, for today's Dustless, it really doesn't have much use." The left eye socket suddenly swept a warm current. Dustless was slightly startled. Carefully feeling the changes of the 6 Tomo Rinnegan in the eye socket, his heart suddenly became happy. This unprecedented throbbing. It seems that the Rinnegan is going to evolve again. Closing his eyes slightly, Wuxia murmured to himself in a low voice. The warm flow that contained a huge amount of vitality flowed into the left eye socket, just like a gentle gaze moistening the Rinnegan. Evolution? Hashirama naturally heard Dustless's words. He didn't hear that the Rinnegan could evolve. He just stared at Dustless's left eye. The Rinnegan can evolve, but then again his Rinnegan still has those black Tomo. Hashirama suddenly realized that Dustless's Rinnegan still had 6 clearly visible black Tomo hanging on the black coil. Extraordinarily mysterious and simple, attracting his attention. Under Hashirama's incredible gaze, the 6 Tomo in Dustless's left eye suddenly became 7 Tomo. How is this possible? The shock in Hashirama's heart was self-evident. He looked at the newly born black Tomo in disbelief, and then remembered what Wuxia had just said. His heart suddenly flashed, and he felt like he had cleared the clouds and looked at the sky. Is it possible that? Hashirama's pupils dilated. Even if he was already a dead person, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat, and his heart was cold. Yes, as you think, the combination of the Uchiha and Senju is the only way to awaken the Rinnegan. The reason why Madara is so obsessed with you is because he saw the contents of the Uchiha's Naka tombstone about the Rinnegan. The cold voice was like a shot in the heart, making Hashirama's heart jump. All the doubts in the past, now suddenly realized that something was wrong. Hashirama's face was gloomy. His eyebrows were sometimes murderous, and sometimes he was unusually frightened. His face was full of fear. Uchiha Madara got the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and saw the content of the Rinnegan. And the way is to combine the power of Hashirama and the power of the Uchiha. Just like what I just said to you, 2 different forces, working together, can get true happiness. Dustless said. The Tomo in his eyes didn't stop decreasing. At this moment, there were already 8 Tomo, and there was still luster flowing in his eyes, constantly moistening the frame. Apparently, it didn't stop evolving. That is to say, that guy also opened the Rinnegan. Hashirama said gloomily, He didn't expect that the birth of the Rinnegan was the combination of the power of the two clans. In all likelihood, Uchiha Madara also opened the Rinnegan. Who knows anyway, he's dead. Hearing this, Dustless smiled softly and gave an ambiguous answer. Uchiha Madara has become a thing of the past, just like the current Hashirama. There is no stage for them to play in the future. What's your purpose? And that summoned beast, looking at the masked Uchiha Obito in the distance, Hashirama asked in a deep voice. He also felt the palpitating power from the decaying giant. My purpose, of course, is to modify the poor work of the Six Paths Sage. Uchiha Madara despised the world created by the Six Paths Sage, and so did Dustless, but their purposes were fundamentally different. Uchiha Madara wanted to become the Jubi's Jinchuriki and release infinite Tsukuyomi to the world, while Dustless just wanted to take away everything from Otsutsuki Kagaya. Therefore, they could be considered as allies, even if it was only temporary. After swallowing the Jubi, I will become the only immortal existence, and reclaim the chakra scattered all over the world, and I will create a new world. Staring at the battlefield in the distance, Dustless couldn't help but be speechless. Uchiha Obito was defeated again and again. Facing the attack of the three Hokage, he was indeed pale and powerless now. Jubi? Hashirama looked at Dustless in puzzlement. It was the first time he heard this word in his life. In his impression, there were only nine-tailed beasts, from the Ichibi to the nine-tailed, but there was no Jubi. The collection of the nine-tailed beasts is the Jubi, and now the Gedomazo is the empty shell of the Jubi. Inject the nine-tailed beasts into it, and the Jubi will be resurrected again. And I will become the new master of the Jubi. Of course, not like the so-called Jinchuriki, but completely take the Jubi's chakra for my own use. Dustless said, and at the same time, the Rinnegan in his left eye changed again, and on the three dark lines, a total of 9 black toma were clearly visible. It seems that this is the end. After a while, Dustless felt that the throbbing of the Rinnegan in his left eye stopped, and he was relieved. At the same time, he could feel that there was a new ninjutsu in the Rinnegan. This is the complete Rinnegan Sharingan. Suddenly, Dustless smiled coldly as he felt the superpower of the Rinnegan Sharingan. The ninjutsu that was born in his eyes was similar to Uchiha Madara's. Chapter 144. Hashirama stared blankly at the Rinnegan in Dustless's eyes. He opened his mouth, but swallowed his words. The mysterious black lines were inlaid with 9 dark tomo, giving people a feeling of mystery. What a powerful eye power! Dustless, who was intoxicated by the Rinnegan's eye power, suddenly opened his eyes. He raised his hand, and a black sphere flew out, directly destroying Hashirama's Edo Tensei. Hashirama, who was already under the control of the yin-yang release, was now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He couldn't resist Dustless at all. Looking leisurely, Kyubi's neck was still bound by the chains from the Gedomazo's mouth. However, the only difference was that Kyubi's body was missing a lot of chakra. It seems that the yang attribute chakra is gone. The Rinnegan and Tensigan turned into normal human eyes. Dustless's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he noticed that Kyubi's chakra was sharply reduced. After carefully sensing it, Dustless found that Kyubi's yang attribute chakra was gone, as if it was taken away by someone. Bastard. Damn Namikaze Minato bastard. The masked man Uchiha Obito looked at Minato with a pale face. His eyes were bloodshot, and his scarlet eyes were even more terrifying. Looking at Obito's gaze, he saw Minato with sweat on his face. A huge shadow appeared behind Minato, with sharp teeth and a white coat. Its body was shriveled, and its face was ferocious. Its dense white hair hung down to its waist, and it had a sharp dagger in its mouth. Obito was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Just now, Minato took advantage of his battle with Sandaime, and Sandaime to use Shiki Fujin to seal the Kyubi's chakra into the body of the little devil. That is, in the body of Minato's newborn son. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way. His dark blue eyes stared at the Kyubi with only half of the chakra left. Minato's face was filled with determination. The target of the two masked men was undoubtedly the Kyubi. He had sealed the yang chakra in his son's body, and sealed the yin chakra in his own body to bring to hell. You won't let us succeed even if you die. That's ridiculous, Minato. Do you think your death will change anything in the face of such a situation? A frivolous and disdainful voice sounded, accompanied by a strong golden beam, like a rainbow cutting through the night sky, whistling straight towards Minato, penetrating his body. It was Dustless, who was wearing a mask. His deep black eyes looked at the Shinigami behind Minato. His eyes were slightly raised, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The beam of light that shot directly shattered his heart. This guy is here. It means that Big Brother is. Seeing Dustless appear, the second Hokage stopped his siege on Obito, and his eyes subconsciously swept towards the place where Dustless and Hashirama fought before. Big Brother's chakra disappeared. Looking back at Dustless cautiously, Tobirama cautiously said, "The disappearance of Hashirama's chakra meant self-evident. Even if it was the immortal body of the Edo Tensei, it has been completely obliterated." Minato's heart was still smoking, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there was a thumb-sized hole in the center of his heart, penetrating his body. "Minato! Yondaime!" The third Hokage and Tobirama exclaimed at the same time. The heart was penetrated, and death was inevitable. It meant that the life of the youngest and most responsible Hokage in the history of Minato was coming to an end. Dustless, the culprit, was indeed indifferent. He ignored the third Hokage's gaze and swept to Obito's side. The Kyuubi's yang chakra has been taken away, and only the yin chakra is left. Obito saw Dustless coming to his side, and said with a heavy voice, his face full of killing intent, "It doesn't matter. Even if half of the chakra is missing, it's not a big deal." Dustless still remembered that in the Fourth Shinobi World War, half of the Kyuubi's chakra was missing when he resurrected the Jubi, but it didn't have much effect. The Jubi was resurrected, and there was nothing wrong with it. Kaguya was the same, and there was no difference. "Go to hell, Minato!" With a ferocious smile, Obito suddenly appeared in front of Minato, and his sharp dagger rushed straight towards his heart. Pucci. The thumb-sized wound on Minato's heart suddenly enlarged, and turned into a fist-sized bloody hole. The Shinigami behind Minato also disappeared, and his breath of life completely disappeared. He closed his eyes in despair. "Do you want to take that kid away? The other half of the Kyuubi is in his body." Obito looked at the sleeping baby with shining eyes, and he couldn't help but have an idea. As for Sandaime and Tobirama, they were just fish on the chopping board, and they didn't have the strength to stop them. "No, it's useless to gather the Kyuubi now. The other bijou are scattered all over the world. The Eye of the Moon plan is a gradual process, and there's no need to rush," Dustless said, and at the same time he controlled the Gedo Mazo, and easily pulled the Kyuubi into the mouth of the Gedo Mazo, and completely sealed it. Dustless raised his eyes and looked deeply at the future Uzumaki Naruto. He shook his head slightly, and his body lost its texture, as if it merged into the void and disappeared. The same happened to Obito and the Gedo Mazo. No matter what the future is, as the reincarnation of Azura, Uzumaki Naruto was destined to have an extraordinary life. Only the devastated Konoha ninja village, and the Sandaime and Nidaime were left behind. They could only watch Dustless and Obito leave so casually, and they had no power to stop them. Even Uchiha Obito, whose strength is far inferior to Wuchin, is also very difficult to deal with. Facing Kamui's space ability, both of them could only look at it and sigh. Chapter 145. In the Rain Village, the rain was hazy, the sky was hazy, and it was always so dark. The people passing through the streets were also like walking corpses, listless and hunched, as if they were possessed, like demons in human skin. Time flew by like a white steed. Unknowingly, a few years had passed. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The 4 major ninja villages of the 5 major countries were all unlucky. They were attacked by Dustless. Not to mention the fact that corpses were everywhere. They were even attacked by many small countries. However, a major country is a major country, and those small countries that took advantage of the situation were quickly razed to the ground. Several years have passed, and the 4 great ninja villages quickly came out of the initial haze, especially Konoha village of the Land of Fire. Konoha, with its superior geographical location, large population and rich resources, was the first to recover and maintain its position as the largest ninja village. Of the 5 villages, only the mist was spared, and it should have firmly occupied the throne of the strongest village. After all, the mist was the one that was not attacked, but in reality, it was not the case. The fate of the mist was actually more miserable. Rin's death was undoubtedly a blow to Obito. Although all the ninjas were killed, except for Dustless, Obito couldn't completely let it go. Because Rin's death was indirectly related to the mist. If the mist didn't inject the Sanbai into Rin's body, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. Therefore, after Wuxia and Obito attacked Konoha, Uchiha Obito lurked in the Mist Village and used his powerful Sharingan to control the 4th Hokage, Yagura, and started a bloody massacre. Many ninjas with Kekkai Genkai were killed by Obito's Yagura. Some time ago, Uchiha Obito bewitched Gunpei Kisame and tricked him into joining the Akatsuki. What's the situation in Konoha? In the brightly lit secret room, Dustless quietly looked at the world in the rain. And after a moment of silence, he couldn't help but ask. His tone was very different from the past, and it had a little bit of magnetism. After a few years of living like a prince, Wuxia no longer had that awe-inspiring and sharp aura from before. His aura was completely restrained, and there was a little more gentleness. Dustless was nearly 20 years old, and compared to his ignorant self, he was now a lot more mature. Since Dustless-sama attacked Konoha a few years ago, there was no suitable person to be the Hokage, and the 3rd had to come back and continue to be the Hokage. Recalling the situation of Konoha in recent years, White Zetsu reported seriously, and after that he silently looked at Dustless's back. In recent years, Dustless has hardly taken a step out of the Rain Village, and has been cultivating in the Mist Village, so there was no way to know what he was doing. Hearing this, Dustless nodded, and his expression was the same as usual. After several years of silence, he was accustomed to not showing his emotions, and after a moment of thinking he asked, "What's the situation of the Uchiha clan? They should be having a very difficult time now." Indeed. Black Zetsu nodded slightly. The situation of the Uchiha clan was indeed not optimistic, and even the 3rd Hokage, who was known as a good person, didn't care about the Uchiha clan. After all, Obito and Dustless, who destroyed Konoha, were both members of the Uchiha clan. Even if they had nothing to do with the Uchiha clan, in the end, they were still members of the Uchiha clan. And it was inevitable that Konoha's higher-ups would feel estranged and disgusted with the Uchiha clan. This is especially true for Shimura Danzo, who is always clamoring to destroy the Uchiha clan to avenge himself and wash away his humiliation. However, according to Dust's guess, this old guy is probably confused by his powerful dojutsu, so he wants to obtain the Sharingan by any means necessary. What a tragic clan. Shaking his head and sighing softly, Dustless didn't feel guilty. Anyway, the Uchiha and Konoha's higher-ups didn't like each other, especially Dustless, who knew Fugaku very well. He was the kind of person who was ambitious, and it was impossible for him to give up resistance and watch the Uchiha clan being mercilessly slaughtered. Has Obito been in contact with Itachi recently, Zetsu? After a moment of silence, Dustless asked again. If he guessed correctly, Obito has been in contact with Uchiha Itachi, hoping that Itachi would join the Akatsuki. Yes, Dustless-sama, but Itachi didn't seem to be in a hurry to agree. White Zetsu nodded first, and then said in confusion, "Leave it to Obito." Dustless shook his head, and then his body disappeared strangely, as if he had drilled into the void. There was no breath, and it was impossible to capture him. And a voice sounded, as if it came from the space and time, and the tone and voice sounded like Dustless. "Have you found the trace of the Ichibi? Don't tell me he's really dead." "The Ichibi is not dead, he's alive, and he's still in the Sand Village," Black Zetsu said with a hoarse voice. In these years, the only thing that Dustless cared about was the trace of the Ichibi, and fortunately, the Ichibi was still alive. "That's good." The voice in the void was relieved. Dustless was really afraid that the Ichibi was really dead. And then the situation would become very complicated, and even the Eye of the Moon plan would have to be aborted. After so many years, Dustless-sama's strength has become more and more unpredictable. After a while, White Zetsu, who recovered, sighed. Dustless was so mysterious these years, he came and went without a trace. Unless Dustless specifically came to find you, There was no way to know where Dustless was. Indeed. Black Zetsa nodded. And it was undeniable that Dustless's strength has reached an incredible level. Deep in the ground, you couldn't see your 5 fingers, you could only see clearly a dozens of meters tall giant. The skin of the whole body was completely dry, like dead wood. The thick and ferocious muscles exposed the skin. And there were 9 huge eyes. Obviously, it was the Ghetto Mazo. A few years. It should be enough. Staring at the giant figure in front of him, Dustless walked. And even his breathing was a little rapid. Obviously, his heart was extremely uneasy. Chapter 146. Staring at the hideous and decaying body of the Ghetto Mazo, Dustless couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Who would have thought that such a withered tree, which was already dead, contained a majestic vitality, even more than the vitality contained in Senju Hashirama's Mokutan. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. It's really true. Glancing at the Ghetto Mazo casually, Dustless said in an indifferent tone. His dark pupils always remained calm. After so many years, Dustless has developed an unchanging attitude in the face of anything. Yes, who would have thought that such a monster would be the shell of the Jubi? The silver-haired beauty appeared, and her dark watery eyes stopped on Dustless's body, and immediately moved over. Her calm eyes rippled. Who else could it be but Otsutsuki Hagoromo? Otsutsuki Haruo's slender silver hair rippled with an elegant fragrance. She wore light makeup and a plain dress. Her skin was smooth and fair, and she was still as coquettish and charming as before. Her smile and frown could turn the world upside down. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her thin pink lips were particularly attractive. Her eyes were narrowed into crescents, and there were charming and lovely dimples on her delicate face. She looked at Wuxia with a smile, and she was particularly lovely and charming. Dustless's face changed slightly. He looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo speechlessly, and then looked at the latter staring at him with a teasing face. He took back the words that were about to come out of his mouth, closed his eyes, and ignored her directly. There was no need to look for trouble. Lecherous but not daring scum. Seeing Dustless closing his eyes and ignoring her, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's expression suddenly stiffened. She no longer had the coquettish posture before. She gritted her teeth and stared at Dustless, stomped her feet, and couldn't wait to kick him. Are you talking about me? Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo with an innocent face, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, they have been married for a long time, and I don't know how many times I have done it with you. How dare you say that I am lecherous but not daring? Is there anyone else here besides you? Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless contemptuously with a sneer on his face. He was very disdainful of Dustless playing dumb. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. Dustless suppressed the impulse to hit her in his heart, and finally shook his head. It was impossible to reason with women, and there was no need to reason. Dustless, who knew Otsutsuki Haruo's temperament well, thought so. Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo's graceful figure, Dustless calmly retracted his gaze, and was too lazy to talk nonsense. What he had to do was to teach her a lesson at night, and make her speechless. It's time. Soon the Uchiha clan will be destroyed. Dustless stared at the black coffin in front of him, and felt the coldness that filled it. He chuckled softly. This fellow is most suitable to be my clone in the future. Kacha. As soon as Wu Chen's voice fell, the ice-cold coffin cracked open with a bang, revealing a rather young figure. The corpse stood up as if it had come back to life. The corpse was extremely well preserved, and there was no sign of damage at all. His facial features were clearly visible, and he was quite handsome. He was wearing a simple black coat, and the Uchiha round fan behind him was clearly visible. The only difference was that there were countless black iron rods inserted all over the body. He will be my clone in the future. Dustless smiled slightly, and the corpse in front of him opened his eyes, revealing scarlet eyes. It was the 3 Tomo Sharingan. Who is this guy? And his eye power doesn't seem to be weak. Otsutsuki Haruo looked at the corpse standing up, and her eyes flashed with surprise. She could feel that the corpse in front of her was extraordinary, especially the eye power of the Sharingan. He is Uchiha Kagami, and he has the Manjikyu Sharingan. His thoughts poured into Uchiha Kagami's mind, and under Otsutsuki Haruo's surprised gaze, Uchiha Kagami's 3 Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected. That pair of eyes is really a waste. Otsutsuki Haruo said with regret. It's a pity to put the Manjikyu Sharingan on a dead person, especially when Dustless is controlling Uchiha Kagami. Even if he has the Manjikyu Sharingan, it won't work. There's no way. Hearing this, Dustless shrugged. Uchiha Kagami's descendant, Uchiha Shursui, should also have the Manjikyu Sharingan now, but if he can pledge his allegiance to him, Dustless can give him Uchiha Kagami's eyes, but this is obviously impossible. Uchiha Kagami will appear in the Akatsuki as my clone in the future, so it's better if I don't show up. The reason why Dustless has such an idea is also after careful consideration. One masked man is enough. He only needs to guide Uchiha Obito behind the scenes to implement the plan, and there is no need to appear in person. 2 masked men may be able to fish in troubled waters in a short time, but as time passes, some clever people will find flaws in it. And by then, there will be many flaws. For example, Uchiha Itachi, not to mention his strength, he is extremely shrewd and extremely sensitive, so it's only a matter of time before he finds flaws. Indeed. Otsutsuki Haruo also felt that Dustless should live in seclusion and shouldn't do everything by himself. Rebuilding the Otsutsuki clan with Dustless is the first important task, especially since there is no movement in his stomach, which makes Otsutsuki Haruo particularly irritable, and all day long he hopes that Dustless will communicate with her more. However, Dustless naturally didn't understand Otsutsuki Haruo's thoughts. He just focused on controlling Uchiha Kagami's body, frowning slightly as he looked at the black conduits all over the body. Your technique is really clumsy, Dustless. Dustless looked at the black iron conduits all over Uchiha Kagami's body with disdain. These conduits are the foundation of controlling Uchiha Kagami's body. This is really not beautiful. Looking at the disorderly black iron conduits inserted all over the body, Dustless smiled awkwardly, and immediately controlled Uchiha Kagami's body to absorb the black iron conduits. Chapter 147. Uchiha Kagami's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, instantly swallowing all the Tetsu in his body. Surprisingly, Uchiha Kagami's scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan flashed a little human-like light, and his cold skin slowly rose in temperature, showing a little warmth. However, what was even more incredible was that Uchiha Kagami was breathing. Otsutsuki Hagura looked at the scene in front of her with surprise, and the shock in her beautiful eyes couldn't be concealed. Uchiha Kagami didn't look dead at all. He looked like a vegetable who had lost his will. There's no need to be surprised. Even if it's resurrecting him, it won't be difficult. Dustless chuckled. This was just a simple use of the yin-yang release, and if Dustless wanted to, he could directly use the Rinnegan's forbidden Jutsu Geto Rinnegan to resurrect Uchiha Kagami, so this was just a trivial matter for Dustless. This appearance should be fine, right? Uchiha Kagami's voice was full of vitality, and he didn't look like a dead body at all. He was obviously an unusually strong young man, full of vitality and sunshine. Ever since Uzumaki Nagato created the 6 Paths of Pain, he used the powerful eye power of the Rinnegan to successfully kill the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, who was known as the demigod. Since then, he began to occupy the Rain Village in the name of God. The orange young man looked down at the misty scenery outside the window. His purple pupils were emotionless, and the mysterious black lines that surged out of his body were deathly still. This person was cold and emotionless, wearing a black robe embroidered with dark red clouds, and the wind and waves from afar would avoid this young man. It was Yahiko Tendo. Conan, have you investigated the origin of the 2 masked men? Yahiko asked indifferently without turning his head. His tone had no human emotion, just like the black iron rods embedded in his body, like a machine. I'm sorry, Nagato. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you again. Hearing this, Conan smiled bitterly. The 2 masked men were naturally Dustless and Obito, but both of them were mysterious existences who came and went without a trace, not to mention investigating their origin. It was difficult to even find their traces. In the past few years, Conan has been secretly investigating Dustless and Obito, especially Dustless. She felt that she had seen Dustless in the past, and every time she saw Dustless, she had a sense of déjà vu. Sure, those two guys are the most troublesome existences. Although he had already expected Conan's answer, Daohiko Mition couldn't help but frown slightly. Whether it was Wuchin or Obito, both of them seemed to have fallen from the sky without leaving any trace. This kind of person was the most difficult to deal with. There, Conan thought. Conan pondered. Conan replied after pondering for a while. Although she didn't know the specific purpose of Wuchin and Obito, at least they were allies now. Well, let's not worry about them for the time being. Yahiko nodded. As Conan said before, whether it was Dustless or Obito, at least they were now in the same boat. After a while, the atmosphere suddenly became silent. Both Conan and Yahiko were silent. What a rare scene. The space beside Yahiko suddenly distorted, like a spring in the deep sea, and soon, a mysterious man wearing a mask and black clothes came out of it, wearing an orange spiral mask and a thin body. It was Uchiha Obito. Don't tell me you don't even know how to deal with people? Conan's pretty face turned ugly when she saw Obito's sudden intrusion. The cold light in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and a sullen expression appeared on her face. Her delicate face was filled with coldness, like a blooming snow lotus. Obviously, she didn't like Obito very much. Oh, you're really unreasonable. We're allies now, but when that guy appeared, you didn't like him so much, Conan. Ignoring Conan's angry face, Uchiha Obito said bluntly, and the guy he was talking about was naturally Wuchin. You, Conan was startled. Her pretty face was very unnatural. She looked at Obito angrily and said coldly, he's different from you, a walking corpse. I'm afraid you can't convince yourself with these words. Obito smiled faintly, then he looked back at Pain, who was still expressionless, and walked straight towards him. Did Uchiha Itachi agree? Without looking at Obito, Yahiko's voice was always so cold, isolated from the world, as if it came from a different space, incompatible with the world in front of him. Not for the time being, I still need a fire. Obito was obviously used to Yahiko's tone, so he just replied faintly. Obviously, his plan to kidnap Itachi was blocked. In that case, after a moment of silence, Pain's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his whole body was filled with killing intent. Then punish him in the name of God. A mere chess piece dares to call himself a god. Ridiculous. Under the mask, Obito raised the corner of his mouth, and immediately said indifferently, that's not necessary, just let nature take its course. I believe that Konoha's higher-ups will soon make a move on the Uchiha. Little did they know that the content of the conversation between Uchiha Obito and Tendo Yahiko fell into the ears of dust in the distance. Let nature take its course. Ridiculous. I only believe in changing fate. Then let me design a script for you in advance, my stupid brother Uchiha Itachi. Chapter 148. A black shadow shuttled through the dense forest at an extremely fast speed, and it was impossible to capture its movement trajectory. Its speed was completely beyond the range of human vision. That kid hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan yet. The figure shuttling through the dense forest was Uchiha Kagami, and his speed was extremely fast. As the controller, Dustless was naturally still far away in the Rain Village, using his powerful eyes to control Kagami's movements. I didn't expect that Kid Itachi hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan. In other words, Uchiha Shursui is still alive. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, was thinking calmly. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in his heart, and his eyes suddenly opened, flashing with a burning light. After thinking for a while, a huge plan suddenly took shape in his heart. In that case, let me help you open your Manjikyu Sharingan. Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile. The way to open his Manjikyu Sharingan is extremely simple and straightforward. As long as Itachi sees his loved ones die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. Now Itachi has 3 Tomo Sharingan. In other words, as long as his loved ones die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. Konoha, it's been a long time. The huge village in front of him came into view, and Dustless smiled through Kagami's vision. He had to sigh that Konoha's ninjas were the most resilient. In just a few years, Konoha came back from the dead and was even more prosperous and powerful than before. However, perhaps because of the previous sneak attack by Wuxia and Obito, Konoha was particularly vigilant about the surrounding environment. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. The layers of security were very strict, and there were many large defensive enchantments. However, these barriers were a simple matter for Dustless, and he easily invaded the interior of Konoha and rushed to the Uchiha base at full speed. A large number of clansmen gathered at the Naka shrine of the Uchiha clan. Many members of the Uchiha clan looked cautious and nervous. Most of the people here were the elite ninjas of the Uchiha clan. Naturally, they were on the side of the Uchiha clan. Of course, there were some special existences among them. The young man, who looked quite similar to Uchiha Kagami, intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Fugaku, who was sitting on the main seat. Sometimes he looked around at the angry members of the Uchiha clan, and his shining eyes dimmed. These fools only think about fighting for power and profit all day long. The young man was Uchiha Shursui. Due to the fact that Dustless had taught Shursui before, he also made a lot of contributions during the 3rd Shinobi World Conference. That's how he got the title Instant Body Shursui. To some extent, it was Dustless who created Shursui. Seeing this scene, the people in the Rain Village suddenly sneered, and their pupils suddenly burst out with horror. Shursui, who was controlled by Dustless, suddenly burst out with strong killing intent. His Sharingan also changed, suddenly turning into a purple Rinnegan. Chapter 149. There is no doubt that Uchiha Shursui is a righteous person. His vision and heart are beyond the narrow clan doctrine, which is rare in the world of shinobi. This is very similar to his father, Uchiha Kagami. In the depths of the dark forest, Dustless controlled Kagami to flash like a ghost, shuttling through the dense forest, controlling the weight of his body to an unparalleled degree. Even if his body fell on a branch as thin as a willow branch, he could jump up and quickly chase after the 2 figures in front of him. Uchiha Shursui, the kid from back then, can already stand on his own. Dustless suddenly remembered when he was still in Konoha. At that time, Uchiha Shursui was just a little kid. Now, after a few years, not only has he successfully awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, but his strength is also quite good. This really made Dustless sigh at the impermanence of the world. But those who stop me will die. Dustless's mouth was cold, and his whole body was overflowing with cold air. If Shursui really uses Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind, then the whole plan will be completely destroyed. His speed is quite good, worthy of the body flicker Shursui. Seeing Shursui's speed as fast as lightning, almost instantly catching up with Fugaku, Dustless smiled slightly. He taught Shursui a lot about the body flicker technique. Shursui. Looking at Uchiha Shursui, who suddenly appeared in front of him, Fugaku frowned slightly, then he relaxed and showed a kind smile as he said with a light chuckle, "I was wondering who it was. What's the matter?" Uchiha Fugaku smiled calmly, giving the feeling of a cool breeze, without the slightest hint of a schemer, which made Shursui hesitate for a while. Fugaku has always been good to him, even better than his son Itachi. If he mercilessly uses Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind, then he really can't do it. Patriarch, please take back your order. The Uchiha should coexist peacefully with Konoha. Clenching his teeth, the hesitation in Shursui's eyes was replaced by determination as he looked at Fugaku and said firmly, "The Uchiha clan is digging its own grave." Shursui's cold and indifferent voice undoubtedly showed his position. Hearing this, the gentle smile on Fugaku's face suddenly stiffened, and he looked at Shursui with uncertainty. This kid has the Manjikyu Sharingan, and can be said to be the current combat power of the Uchiha clan. If Fugaku is not optimistic about the future of the Uchiha clan, then maybe the Uchiha clan will be completely destroyed. Foolish Shursui. Fugaku scolded coldly. Since the incident a few years ago, the higher-ups of Konoha have been treating us coldly, and they can't wait to get rid of us as soon as possible. Haven't you seen the situation of the Uchiha clan over the years? Fugaku sneered. Also, even if I really give up this plan, do you think that the higher-ups of Konoha will let the Uchiha clan go? I'm sorry to tell you that this is impossible. Although Fugaku's words were a bit fierce, what he said was indeed an undeniable fact. Even if the Uchiha clan is really sincere in serving Konoha, with the existence of a character like Shimura Danzo, the Uchiha clan won't be safe and sound. Patriarch, you only need to answer my question, whether you will give up this rebellion or not, and I will naturally solve other problems. Shursui looked at Fugaku with a blank expression, and the Sharingan in his eyes was spinning rapidly. As long as Fugaku refuses his proposal, Shursui will not hesitate to use Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind. I'm sorry, but I won't accept your conditions even if I'm torn to pieces. As long as we resist Konoha, it will be a shortcut for the Uchiha clan. Fugaku's eyes were filled with wisdom, and at the same time, his 3 Tomo Sharingan began to spin. He knew that the next battle would be hard. Several guards also surrounded Fugaku and stared at Shursui. Shursui's instant body flicker is not a joke, and perhaps in just a moment, their heads will fall to the ground. In that case, under the horrified gaze of Fugaku and the others, Shursui's Mangekyo flashed and stared at Fugaku's sluggish eyes, and the Mangekyo emitted a strong fluctuation of eye power. Kodo Amatsukami. Not good. Feeling the horrifying eye power of Shursui, Fugaku's face changed dramatically, and his whole body became cold, and a huge spiritual force invaded his mind, causing him to faint instantly. Boom. However, at this moment, a strange black figure shuttled, and it was extremely fast, and it easily kicked Obito, and the huge force kicked Shursui dozens of feet away. One step too late. Looking at Fugaku on the ground, Kagami frowned, and Dustless's face became gloomy. For the sake of our old friendship, I wanted to let you go, but it seems that I have to take your eyes to change Fugaku's will. Thinking of this, Dustless controlled Kagami's eyes to jump with a cold light. And the only way to change Fugaku's will is to use Kodo Amatsukami or Izanami. However, the price of using Izanami is too great, and it's definitely not something Dustless can afford. Although Dustless can control Kagami's eyes, as long as he takes Shursui's eyes, he can change Fugaku's will again. Who the hell are you? Shursui's face was ugly as he looked at the man in black with a very familiar feeling. Hearing this, the corner of Dustless's mouth curled into a playful smile. Then he turned his head, revealing half of his face, looking at Shursui with a cold expression. My stupid son. Don't you even recognize your own father? Chapter 150. Shursui looked sluggishly at the face that was similar to his own. It was undoubtedly his father, Uchiha Kagami. However, after a moment of shock, Shursui quickly recovered. His father entered the kingdom of heaven many years ago. It's not father, that is to say. Shursui's face suddenly turned pale, and an endless cold aura floated from his body. Even the air around him was completely frozen and shattered. Since it's a puppet, but a puppet that can breathe, it's really rare. Shursui's Manjikyu Sharingan stared at the smiling Uchiha Kagami, and his face was full of disbelief. The puppet in front of him was too lifelike, and no one would believe it if he said that it was a normal human being. It's just a puppet, but not only does it have the ability to breathe, especially the bright eyes of Uchiha Kagami, which has the effect of passing off as the real thing. I'm afraid that people who don't know whether Uchiha Kagami is dead or alive will think that the person in front of them is alive. You dare to desecrate my father's body, I will kill you. The scarlet-red Manjikyu Sharingan glared at Uchiha Kagami, and he glared at Dustless who was controlling Kagami, and his killing intent was constantly bursting out of his body. Obviously, Kagami was completely out of control. You think you can kill me? Kagami sneered at Shursui, and he was thinking about which eye he should take, and it didn't matter whether Shursui agreed or not. Body flicker technique. Whoosh! In just a short time, Shursui appeared behind Kagami, and the sharp katana reflected an extremely cold light as it swept towards Kagami. Your speed is good, but it's still a bit slow. Suddenly, a golden light flashed from his body, and the dazzling golden luster dotted around his body, turning into a strong and thick rib that easily blocked the fatal blow. Is this Kinsusanu? Shursui's eyes narrowed slightly, and he instantly burst a distance away, and stared at Kagami's dark eyes, and immediately felt the golden light of the evil chakra, and his heart couldn't help but sink. To be able to release Susanoo with ordinary eyes, who is the one controlling father behind the scenes. Shursui looked at Kagami's dark eyes with a heavy expression, and his heart fell to the bottom, and he couldn't help but wonder who was controlling Kagami behind the scenes. Ken Susanoo is a ninjutsu that can't be used casually, and there are many restrictions, and the person behind it can control the puppet to use Ken Susanoo at will. It can be seen that he also has the same Manjikyu Sharingan, and obviously, his eye's power has reached an unfathomable level. Do you want to hand me your eyes, Kagami? Shursui's Shursui and Shishijui, and the golden sword in his hand, and the golden sword in his hand and golden sword in his. Well, don't underestimate me, and you're not the only one who can use that technique. Ken Susanoo. Green chakra overflowed from Kagami's body, and strong ribs impressively formed, and a strong defense suddenly formed, and the afterglow spread out and wrapped around Shursui, looking extremely strong. Puchi. The golden light directly penetrated the absolute defense that seemed like an iron tower, and Shursui's body started to bleed. How is this possible? Looking at the blood on his abdomen, Shursui's face was particularly shocked, and although he instinctively dodged, he was still injured by the sword. How is this possible? Hearing this, Shursui's dark eyes flashed with contempt, and he said, "In the face of absolute power, any ninjutsu in the world is futile." Ken Susanoo's strength is beyond doubt, but it also varies from person to person. If the opponent is a strength-type player like Hashirama, then no matter how strong Ken Susanoo is, he can only look at the dust. However, if the opponent is someone like the 5 Kages, then it's godlike ninjutsu for them. Deceiving the masses with your lies. Looking coldly at Shursui, Shursui sneered, and the green chakra erupted again, and the ribs that were broken by Dustless were repaired. More majestic chakra wrapped around the thick bones, and after a few breaths of time, the giant chakra was exposed to the air. It was the mature Ken Susanoo of Uchiha Shursui. The green giant was wrapped in an extremely cold aura, and it looked ferocious. It held a drill-like weapon in its huge hand, and the sharp tip made people tremble unconsciously. Too small. Seeing this, Uchiha Kagami shook his head, or to put it simply, Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Kagami, didn't care about it at all. The gap between the mature form and the ultimate form of Susanoo is completely dimensional. It seems that you can't hand over your eyes. So, I can only take them myself. Dustless's eyes suddenly shot out a cold light, and the pupils of Dustless in the Rain Village instantly distorted rapidly, and unprecedented fluctuations of eye power shot out from his eyes. Shursui's pupils changed naturally, and the deep black eyes turned into purple Rinnegan. The mysterious black lines spread out like water ripples, and there were 9 clear dark black tomo hanging on it, which was particularly attractive. That's Ken Susanoo's Shursui looked at Shursui's right eye sluggishly. He never heard that his father had this mysterious black tomo hanging on his eyes. Don't be so surprised, I'll let you feel the ultimate power of the Rinnegan. Kagami looked at Shursui inside the Susanoo with a sinister smile. His eyes were fixed on the Susanoo, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Mahabharata. Chapter 151. Mahaharoi. Kagami's left eye suddenly stared at Shursui inside Ken Susanoo, and the Sharingan in his left eye rippled, and the 9 tomo hanging on the black lines trembled slightly. What kind of jutsu is this? Uchiha Shursui, who was in the mature Susanoo, looked at Uchiha Kagami as if he was facing a great enemy. Especially when he saw the purple eyes with the 9 tomo, he had a bad feeling in his heart that he had never felt before. It was like being stared at by a prehistoric beast. It's definitely not an ordinary jutsu, it must be. Boom. Boom. Shursui's voice inside the Susanoo hasn't fallen yet, when a strong repulsive force came head-on, and an unprecedented heavy blow directly swallowed the Susanoo. The seemingly mighty Ken Susanoo was instantly torn apart. Puff! Blood splashed in midair, and looking up, it was Shursui who was hit by the repulsive force. His whole body was covered in blood, and his clothes were all stained with blood. He didn't seem to have the strength to fight anymore, but some people can't be judged by common sense. Even so, Shursui still struggled to stand up. Are your eyes the legendary Rinnegan? Looking at Kagami's left eye, Shirsue's eyes were filled with understanding. A long time ago, there were legends of the 3 great dojutsu in the ninja world. Yes, you know the Rinnegan through ninjutsu. Although the legend of the Rinnegan has been passed down since ancient times, but in the end, there are very few people who really understand it, and the difference between Dustless's Rinnegan and the ordinary Rinnegan is quite big. It's true. It's easy to recognize. Hearing this, Shirsue's mouth raised a bitter smile, and said in despair, "Such an eye can't be the Byakugan, and naturally it can't be the Sharingan. Although there is a big difference between your eyes and the legendary Rinnegan, it still retains the shape of the Rinnegan to a large extent." That's true. Kagami nodded. Although Uchiha Shirsue's statement was just an inference, it was true. If the 9 toma were removed from the eyes, there wouldn't be much difference between the eyes and the Rinnegan. A character like you shouldn't be interested in Uchiha. I don't think he has any relationship with you. Shirsue pointed at Fugaku, who had fainted, and said to Dustless with a rosy complexion on his face, "Mahaharoya's frontal attack, and you can still hold on until now, not bad." Kagami nodded slightly. The essence of Mahaharoya is actually similar to Amaterasu. It releases a strong repulsive force at the focus of the pupil, and it can be positioned at will. In fact, it's not much different from Madara's wheel grave, border prison. However, Kagami can naturally see that Shirsue has reached the end of his life. "You can't say that, he's an important part of my script." Kagami replied with a faint smile, and then looked at Shirsue with a cold expression. "As long as I take your Sharingan, I can change his will again. Then it won't be long before the Uchiha clan is completely destroyed." Kagami's mouth raised into a gloomy smile. Shirsue's previous use of Kodo Amatsukami to tamper with Fugaku's will did indeed cause him a lot of trouble. But now, as long as he takes his Sharingan, he can use Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's will again. "Although I don't know what your purpose is, I won't let you succeed." Shirsue's eyes were full of determination, and his face was resolute. He loved Konoha, and he was willing to sacrifice his life to protect the Uchiha clan. A sad ant crushed by the wheel of fate. You can't change the outcome of the Uchiha clan's destruction. Looking at Uchiha Shirsue's determined face with disdain, Mirror's face was full of sarcasm. Now Shirsue's body was full of gold and jade. Almost all of his internal organs were shattered by the Mahabharata, and it won't be long before he dies. "I know you want nothing more than to take my Sharingan, to reactivate Kodo Amatsukami, and change Fugaku's will again." Uchiha Shirsue smiled faintly. He could see through this point, and immediately his face became gloomy. "Then, this is the only way to protect Uchiha and the village." Pucci. Under Kagami's surprised gaze, Shirsue didn't show the slightest mercy, and his fingers hooked, and without hesitation, he dug out his Mangekyo. Boom. Shirsue's right hand suddenly burst, and the 2 soft eyeballs exploded into blood mist. Shirsue looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. Everything happened so fast that he almost couldn't react. When he came back to his senses, Shirsue's Mangekyo Sharingan had already turned into a bloody mist. "Your personality hasn't changed, Shirsue." After a long silence, Kagami sighed and looked at Shirsue with a complicated expression. Looking at the shattered Mangekyo Sharingan, Kagami didn't hate Shirsue, because this wasn't his fault, and it was this deformed era that caused his tragedy. Uchiha Shirsue's greatness was beyond doubt. He was willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the village, even if it was his own life. Even if Shimura Danzo took his eye, he still didn't feel any hatred or pain towards the village. Even before his death, he gave his other eye to Uchiha Itachi, hoping that he would protect the village. Shirsue was a man of justice, but he was also a hero of tragedy. "But this didn't change my plan, Shirsue. Even without your Mangekyo Sharingan, I can still change Fugaku's will again." Chapter 152. Shirsue fell to the ground powerlessly. He has lost his Mangekyo Sharingan, and he is now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Whether he is killed or not depends entirely on Kagami's will. It's really bad. Dustless, who was controlling Kagami in the Rain Village, frowned slightly. Fugaku's will was tampered with by Kodo Amatsukami. If he doesn't change his mind back to its original state, I'm afraid that the Uchiha will really turn their hostility towards Konoha into friendship. I can only use that technique. The hesitation in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Dustless took back his dojutsu and continued to control Kagami's actions. Kagami suddenly closed his eyes, and after a while, when he opened them again, they became ordinary Sharingan. Idiot! Do you think that you can stop me without your Manjikyu Sharingan? Anyway, I'm using Kagami's eyes. It's just a loss of one eye. Dustless of the Rain Village secretly sneered. It was impossible to help Fugaku by blinding his own eyes, but he could use Kagami's eyes to launch the jutsu. Uchiha Kagami, who was in the middle of the secret meeting with Uchiha Fugaku in the Naka Shrine, suddenly shouted loudly, and his 3 Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected and turned into a big pinwheel, and immediately, a strong chakra fluctuation erupted from his body and rushed straight towards Uchiha Fugaku. Fugaku, who was affected by chakra, opened his eyes in a daze and looked at Kagami in a daze. He could feel that Kagami woke him up. Izanami. Kagami's left eye suddenly jumped, and a strong dojutsu suddenly burst out, and all of his dojutsu rushed out. Fugaku's eyes were empty and gray, and he lost the ability to think like a vegetable. He just looked at Fugaku and then fainted again. Just a moment ago, Kagami used Izanami to change Fugaku's will back to his original ambitious self. It seems that your plan has failed, Shursui. Looking back at Uchiha Shursui, who was lying motionless on the ground, Kagami said faintly. The left eye that released Izanami was also completely sealed, turning into a one-eyed beast. You should be Lord Dustless. Shursui seemed to have reached the end of his life. His voice was extremely weak. He seemed to have exhausted all his strength, but his tone was full of unquestionable certainty. You're as sharp as ever, Shursui. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, heard this and immediately shook his head. Uchiha Shursui used to be like this. Even if Dustless and Shursui only spent a short time together, no matter when and where, he was always so straightforward and not sloppy, and he was also very smart. If Shursui's position wasn't so firm, Dustless really wanted to take him as his subordinate. When the golden Kansusanu appeared, I was already sure that in this era, only Dustless Sama, who died a few years ago, has that level of power. Shursui was fortunate enough to be taught by Dustless, so naturally, he knew Dustless better than anyone else. Do you hate me, Shursui? With a slight sigh, Kagami didn't try to hide it, which is equivalent to indirectly controlling Dustless. His right eye, which had completely disappeared due to the activation of Izanami, opened again, revealing a clear black pupil. Naturally, it was created by Dustless using yin-yang release. I don't hate you, but now, I understand a little bit why Dustless Sama chose to leave Konoha. Shursui, who was lying on the ground, looked ordinary. His position was different, and his thoughts were different, and everything he knew was taught to him by Dustless. Where there are people, there will be darkness, and where there is darkness, there will be conflict, and where there is conflict, there will be bloodshed like this. The so-called peace doesn't exist. The essence of peace is absolute force. And if the strength of a village doesn't surpass the strength of other villages, it will be trampled. Now that he recalled what Dustless said to him, Shursui felt his heart suddenly open. Konoha was peaceful, but this so-called peace was built on the pain of other countries. It was a false peace, so the so-called peace didn't exist at all. I'm happy that you can see things so clearly, Shursui. His left eye suddenly turned blue, and Kagami suddenly raised his head and swept towards the distant sky. The powerful insight of the Tensigen was displayed, and the situation within a radius of tens of kilometers was clear to him. Even the slightest movement in the wind couldn't escape his eyes. That's... A dark shadow quickly entered Dustless's line of sight. The young man was quite handsome, and his appearance was similar to Dustless's, as if they were carved from the same mold. The newcomer was wearing Konoha's Umbu uniform, and the 8 mark on his face was clearly visible. But from beginning to end, there was endless indifference, and he kept people thousands of miles away. Finally, my stupid brother, I've been waiting for you to win the Best Actor award for a long time. Retracting the Tensigen's line of sight, Kagami's mouth curled into an indifferent smile. The Best Actor award in his mouth was undoubtedly Uchiha Itachi. Looking back, he then looked at Kagami, who was still motionless and breathing weakly, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Now Itachi still had 3 Tomo Sharingan, and as long as Kagami killed Shursui in front of him, he could help Itachi awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan. Thank me, I actually have to do it for you. Itachi quickly came into sight. Kagami's murderous intent flashed, and suddenly a black flame jumped out of his fingertips. Looking indifferently at the half-dead Shursui, he ruthlessly threw the black flame. Chapter 153. Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke in the system and took everything from him. There was no doubt that he also took the ability to control the Amaterasu at will. The flame in Kagami's hand was undoubtedly the Amaterasu. The moment the black flame touched Shursui, it suddenly enlarged and instantly wrapped his whole body. Shursui's whole body was bathed in the strange black flame. And this scene was seen by Itachi, who just arrived in time. Shinra Tensei. Seeing Itachi rushing straight towards him, Kagami shook his head, and an irresistible repulsion broke out of his body. Itachi was caught off guard and bounced back dozens of feet. Itachi was particularly weak now, like a willow branch swaying in the wind. He could only go with the flow, watching the Amaterasu constantly swallowing Shursui's body. Shursui. Uchiha Itachi let out a sorrowful cry as he looked at Shursui, who was completely swallowed up. The 3 Tomo in his eyes surged with powerful dojutsu fluctuations, turning into the Manjikyu Sharingan in the shape of a windmill. This should be considered as fulfilling your wish. Shursui, go in peace. Kagami turned his head and looked at Shursui with no expression. Far away in the rain village, Dustless's eyes dimmed. The relationship between Shursui and Itachi was well known, and he was reluctantly helping Itachi, as expected of Uchiha Itachi. Noticing the unusual fluctuations in Itachi's eyes, Kagami nodded slightly in appreciation. Looking at Itachi's murderous face, he shrugged helplessly and smiled. I am the benefactor who helped you open the Manjikyu Sharingan. Now instead of thanking me, you are staring at me like you want to eat me. It's really Amaterasu. Suddenly, a dark flame appeared on Kagami's body, just like the Amaterasu that appeared on Shursui's body. It seems that this kid's vengeful heart is quite strong, and he intends to kill him in the same way. You really don't understand human feelings. Uchiha Kagami's frivolous voice came from the fire that was devoured by the Amaterasu. His tone sounded like he was in pain, and he seemed to be mocking Itachi for overestimating himself. Immediately, he walked out of the black fire safely with a frivolous expression. What a strange ability to absorb the Amaterasu. Itachi's incomparably calm face was full of surprise, and his heart was silent. He cautiously looked at Kagami, who walked out of the fire with the Amaterasu burning on his shoulder, secretly thinking about the ability of the person in front of him. Well, let's play, let's see how many tricks you have. Looking at the bloodstains from the corner of Itachi's eyes due to using Amaterasu, Kagei's Tenseigan directly swept towards Itachi, and saw the internal situation of Itachi's body clearly. It's Kagami's eyes, Kagami's SSS. Through the high-density observation of the Tenseigan, Kagami found that Itachi's body was normal, and the reason why he got sick later was probably because of the excessive use of the Manjikyu Sharingan. Itachi can be said to be the most abnormal and most unreasonable member of the Uchiha family in history. Kinsusanoo was the only one who had 3 generations of artifacts. Once he merged with the Manjikyu Sharingan and gave birth to the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, his ultimate body Kinsusanoo would be the most powerful. The gap between us is too big, and you're not my opponent. Kagami stared at Itachi's cautious face, smiled slightly, and immediately said, Come on, let me see how strong you are. Hearing this, Itachi just looked at Dustless with a blank face, and his pupils were as calm as stagnant water. He didn't look like a person who was in a desperate situation at all. The windmill-like Manjikyu Sharingan rotated rapidly, and his pupils set off stormy waves. Tsukuyomi. The smiling Uchiha Kagami's pupils instantly turned gray and lost their color. He looked like a walking corpse, as if his soul had been taken away. Is this the burden of the Manjikyu Sharingan? It's really a self-destructive eye. The stinging pain in his eyes made Itachi feel like dying, especially when he used the Amaterasu. An unprecedented sense of mental exhaustion poured into his body, and his strength and bones seemed to be taken away, making him feel like he was about to collapse. But fortunately I killed him. Looking at Uchiha Kagami's gray pupils, Itachi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he used the unexpected Tsukuyomi to deal with him. Otherwise, a fierce battle would have been inevitable. Kill me? Do you think you can kill me with this genjutsu? You're so naive that it makes me feel sad, Itachi. A dark shadow blocked the sun, and Itachi was slightly startled. He suddenly looked up and saw Uchiha Kagami, who appeared in front of him unscathed. Lightspeed kick. Boom. Itachi, who didn't react, flew out like a cannonball. The destructive force broke countless trees behind him and pulled out a long ditch. You want to defeat me with a mere genjutsu? Ridiculous. Kagami looked at Itachi with interest and nodded slightly. Just now he used the ability of the Manjikyu Sharingan's right eye, Omniscient, to ignore Itachi's Tsukuyomi. In front of Omniscient, no ability in the world is effective against him. Only physical attacks work, no matter what kind of genjutsu it is. His reaction is quite fast. Feeling a slight numbness in his feet, Kagami's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, and immediately looked at the fiery red chakra wrapped around Itachi's body, and calmed down again. Just now, it was obvious that he summoned Susanoo to block Dustless's heavy blow for him. Chapter 154. Uchiha Itachi, who was flying upside down, raged the surrounding terrain like a harvester, easily pulling out hundreds of meters of narrow ditches. However, due to the powerful defense of Susanoo, although Itachi was injured, it wasn't fatal and didn't get in the way. Puchi. What a powerful force. The blood in his lungs was boiling, and the red blood directly broke out of his mouth and sprinkled all over the void. Uchiha Itachi's face was particularly ugly, and he subconsciously touched his chest. Maybe if he didn't react quickly just now, he might have been broken by Dustless's kick. At this moment, it was not impossible for his soul to return to the sky. He slowly stood up, brushed off the fresh soil on his body, and his calm eyes fell on Kagami. The coldness in his pupils condensed into ice, and a cold killing intent emerged. In this case, I can only meet force with force. After saying that, Uchiha Itachi's body surged with crimson chakra. The deep color was as enchanting as blood, wrapping his whole body tightly. It was like a strong iron bucket that could defend against any attack. Chakra continued to gush out, and the momentum didn't stop. The bones formed before seemed to be alive, constantly absorbing chakra from Itachi's body, strengthening their own body, and rapidly expanding. He's really desperate. Looking at Itachi releasing his chakra without restraint, Kagami frowned slightly. This kid is supposed to die young. If his lifespan is reduced because of this battle, it's definitely going to reduce his lifespan. Ow, ow, ow. A deafening roar sounded, like a thunder on the ground, awakening Dustless from his contemplation. Looking up, he saw a fiery red halo covering the sky, and the sunlight projected from Susanoo had a feeling of being eroded by evil. His entire body was covered in crimson flames that seemed to come from the red lotus karmic fire of hell, destroying all matter that came into contact with it. The giant held an incomparably sharp greatsword in one hand, and an incomparably sturdy shield in the other. It gave the feeling of a fearless god of war, despising everything. This looks pretty good. Kagami's eyes swept over Susanoo's body, and a faint ripple appeared in his eyes. He felt that Susanoo was barely acceptable. At least, it looked much stronger than Shirsue's Susanoo. It could attack and defend, especially with a long-range attack weapon like Yasaka's Magatama. Overall, Uchiha Itachi's Susanoo is the most perfect. The only pity is that this seemingly invincible Susanoo is not the ultimate form, and it is inevitable that there will be some flaws. Whoosh. With a touch of coldness in his eyes, Kagami waved his hand, and a powerful golden beam swept straight towards Susanoo's eyebrows. The cold beam seemed to penetrate Itachi's head. It's useless. Seeing this, Itachi's eyes were as calm as water, and at the same time, Susanoo's crimson shield and Yada no Kagami blocked in front of the oncoming golden beam without fear. The golden light that seemed to penetrate everything was easily blocked by the fiery red shield, leaving only a thumb-sized burn mark on Yata no Kagami, emitting a faint white smoke. "It's a good defense, I want to rob it," Kagami sincerely praised, and he coveted the absolute defense of Yata no Kagami. He couldn't help but want to use the system's ability to train Itachi and steal Kansusanu's ability. Crazy talk. The calm eyes looked at Kagami indifferently, and 3 huge fiery red tomo condensed in his hand. The shape of the tomo was connected by a rope, quite similar to the 3 tomo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Yata no Magatama. Kansusanu's big hand threw out the fiery red tomo with great power, and it felt like it could crush and strangle Kagami. "It's useless as long as I want to, this attack can't even touch me." After saying that, Uchiha Kagami's whole body was covered in a golden halo, turning into a golden giant arm holding a long sword. He stared at the 3 red tomo without fear, and the golden long sword roared down. Kansusanu followed the mind of the caster to make any action, and it could also be used locally, such as only summoning a partial arm, palm, and other forms to fight. Whoosh! A dazzling golden light flashed in the void, and Susanu's Tachi, which shrouded Wuchin's body, roared out, and the golden light directly penetrated the crimson flame. Kacha! The 3 tightly connected tomo were torn apart by brute force, and the uneven gap looked like it was torn apart by a fierce beast, and people couldn't help but wonder what kind of beast this masterpiece came from. Sure enough, the gap is too big. Seeing the destruction of Yasaka's Magatama, Itachi frowned slightly and secretly thought about countermeasures to deal with Kagami. However, he was helpless to find that he had no means to suppress Kagami. The so-called strategy played no role in the face of absolute power, and it would only make him a laughingstock. "If you don't come, I'll attack." Seeing that Itachi didn't move, Kagami took the initiative to attack, and his whole body burst out in a rainbow light, and the harsh roar blew the air to the horizon. So fast! Itachi's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately controlled Kansusanu's sword of Tatsuka to slash at Kagami, and the falling cold light seemed to delay the speed of Kagami's attack. "Stupid thing, now I'll let you understand how big the gap between us is. You can't fight me with the weak eyes of the Mangekyo, never." Chapter 155. His pupils dilated, and the Rinnegan in his left eye flashed again, and 9 dark tomo hung on the black coil, giving people a feeling of extreme mystery. Kagami's speed was extremely fast, like a gust of wind, and he couldn't be touched. Kagami's left eye's sight fell down, and on the blade, a strong repulsive force suddenly surged in his pupils, and the 9 tomo also trembled fiercely. Mahabharata. Boom. The irresistible powerful repulsive force broke out again, and the location of the explosion was Kansusanu holding the Tatsuka sword. The strong wave spread to the sky like an endless wave, and Kansusanu, who was at the center of the explosion, was directly swallowed. Kansusanu's huge body was instantly dismembered, destroyed by the unparalleled overbearing repulsive force, and completely wiped out. Because the power was too terrifying, it simply wiped out all the flowing matter in the surrounding air, forming a large vacuum area. And even in an instant, space was distorted by brute force, causing a large area of space-time reflux, and then space collapsed. As for Uchiha Itachi, he had completely fainted, and his breath was weak, but he was still alive. Of course, this was the result of Kagami's intention. Finally, it's done. Looking at the half-dead Uchiha Itachi lying on the ground, dustless, who was far away in the rain village, smiled as if he had succeeded in his plot. He breathed a sigh of relief. "This is barely on the right track. I'm afraid it won't be long before you agree to the conditions of Konoha's higher-ups and choose to go undercover inside the Akatsuki, and that kid Uchiha Obito seems to have promised you that he won't do anything to Konoha." Carefully recalling the memories of his previous life, he realized that Uchiha Itachi would soon betray Konoha and embark on the road of no return. Well, Kagami's huge perception spread out like a tide, and suddenly felt that the surrounding environment was not right, and some ripples flashed in his eyes, and his face was full of surprise. It turned out to be him. After carefully sensing the surroundings, he suddenly realized that a large number of powerful ninjas were rushing over, and the one leading them was the leader of the Root Division, Shimura Danzo. In fact, Shursui should have been dealt with by Shimura Danzo. The reason why Uchiha Jin replaced Danzo was that Shursui used Koto Amatsukami on Fugaku Uchiha, so he had no choice but to act. Leave the two of them here. Even if Danzo is brave, he won't dare to kill them. Taking a glance at Fugaku and the unconscious Itachi, Kagami thought to himself. One is the patriarch, and the other is the son of the patriarch. If Shimura Danzo killed them both, it will inevitably cause a backlash from the other clans. No one wants Konoha to have a lawless person who dares to kill the patriarchs of other clans. Then he took a deep look at Itachi, and a strange smile appeared on his face. From now on, this kid will probably be very persistent with him. This also paved the way for Itachi to enter the Akatsuki, because Kagami is now wearing the Akatsuki's uniform. If Itachi wants to investigate him, he must choose to join the Akatsuki. Your life is a puppet on the front stage and I am the person behind you. Sun Wukong will never be able to escape from the palm of the Buddha. Finally, Kagami withdrew his gaze from Itachi, and his body flashed with a golden luster, and as if tearing the space apart, he directly drilled into it and disappeared completely. 1 month later, in the Rain Village, the sky was hazy and hazy. That guy Orochimaru should have agreed to join the Akatsuki, right? In the secret room with dirty light, Wu Chun, who was wearing a mask, looked at Obito. His eyes flashed with a thick light, and then he asked indifferently. Indeed, but Orochimaru didn't have good intentions. He wanted to take Yahiko's Rinnegan, but he was defeated by Pain's Rikudo, so he agreed to join the Akatsuki. Obito said, and it seemed that he was extremely disdainful of Orochimaru's conspiracy, and he ridiculed. Orochimaru's ambition is not small. He was very coveting Uchiha's Sharingan, and now seeing the Rinnegan above the Sharingan and the Byakugan, it's impossible for him not to have evil thoughts. It's Uzumaki Nagato who is useless. Dustless curled his lips under the mask, and he was extremely disdainful of Uzumaki Nagato. Since he had the Rinnegan, many people had ideas about him. At first it was Dustless himself, then it was the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, and now it was Orochimaru. He's really not good. With his body like that, he can't exert the power of the Rinnegan at all. On this point, Obito and Dustless's views were quite similar. They both thought that Uzumaki Nagato was not good. Others only needed to use chakra to activate the power of the Rinnegan, but Uzumaki Nagato had to go all out. This is also the reason why they didn't match. After all, the owner of the Rinnegan was Madara, so Uzumaki Nagato was naturally more difficult to use. But then again, staring at Dustless, Obito said, Uchiha Itachi of Konoha has agreed to join the Akatsuki, and in exchange he will destroy the Uchiha. But his condition is that he can't attack Konoha and the Kyubis. Promise him, Obito, the other half of the Kyubi has been bound by me and the Gedomazo. Even without the yang chakra of the Kyubi, it doesn't matter. Dustless waved his hand and said resolutely, the chakra of the Kyubi will not be a big deal, and the Jubi can still be resurrected as usual. Moreover, Dustless's ambition is not the so-called Jubi's Jinchuriki. For him, becoming the Jubi's Jinchuriki is meaningless. The so-called different realm, people's vision also changes. Today, Dustless just wants to replace Kagaya, or completely devour her, not become the so-called Jinchuriki. Chapter 156. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, a few days passed. During this period, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha became more and more intense. Uchiha Fugaku's will was changed by Dustless's Izanagi, and he once again became the ambitious Fugaku of the past. Nowadays, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha is like dry wood and fire. As long as someone deliberately adds some sparks, the situation between the two sides will be set off. However, even so, both sides still maintain the greatest restraint. Killing 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 of your own men is a simple and clear truth, and these old foxes understand it. The Uchiha is recognized as the strongest clan in Konoha, and there are many strong people in the clan. Even after its destruction, Konoha's own strength will be greatly damaged, and it may also have other effects. If a top clan wants to be destroyed, then other clans will think the same. and it's inevitable that they will be prepared for danger. Rice bucket, a bunch of useless trash. In the dark environment, Shimura Danzo looked at his subordinates with murderous intent in his eyes, and his whole body was trembling with anger. At this moment, he was like a dying beast, giving off a gloomy and terrifying feeling. It's no wonder that Shimura Danzo was so angry. He originally planned to seize Uchiha Shirsue's eyes, but in the end he didn't get anything. Instead, he was responsible for sending the unconscious Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Itachi back to the Uchiha space. Those who don't know Shinzo Shirsue's ulterior motives will inevitably splash dirty water on him. Danzo-sama, Uchiha Shirsue's whereabouts have not been found yet. It's as if he has evaporated from the world, and there is no trace of him at all. The root ninja who was half kneeling on the ground looked at Danzo cautiously. Even if their inner feelings have been obliterated by Danzo's inhumane training, they couldn't help but feel fear in the face of Danzo's anger. This old man doesn't want to listen to your explanation. Is it possible that he has been killed? Shimura Danzo's face was full of murderous intent as he roared angrily. Of course, he wouldn't kill his most loyal subordinates. After all, he spent many years training them, and they were absolutely loyal to him. Is Uchiha Shirsue really dead? Shimura Danzo couldn't help but think to himself. If Shirsue was really killed, then it's understandable that they couldn't find his body. Root's intelligence network is almost all over Konoha, so as long as Shirsue is still in Konoha, they should be able to find him. Forget it. Don't make a move against the Uchiha for the time being, and remember to secretly monitor the Kyuubi. Shimura Danzo was no longer entangled in this matter, and his passion for the Uchiha also cooled down. Casually attacking the Uchiha would cause a lot of trouble, and it might even cause a war between Konoha and the Uchiha, which would not be worth the loss. This is interesting. I didn't expect Danzo to be so sensible. It's rare. It seems that he's grown up. He's not as brainless as before. Hidden in the root, Kagami's mouth curled into a smile. Danzo used to be extremely cunning and reckless, and whenever he mentioned the Uchiha, he would get angry, but now it's rare for him to know when to advance or retreat. It seems that both Konoha and the Uchiha have maintained the greatest restraint, but let me be the one to ignite your war. With a cold smile on his face, Kagami's body suddenly disappeared. Dustless, who was controlling Kagami from the Rain Village, was filled with endless killing intent. Uzumaki Naruto, I'm sorry. Thinking of a plan, Uchiha Kagami's eyes flashed with determination. Uzumaki Naruto's childhood was miserable, it's simply a metaphor for tragedy. Although he sympathized with Uzumaki Naruto's life, he was in a different position, and in this cruel world, there was no market for sympathy. In the dead of night, a vigorous black shadow shuttled through Konoha's ninja village, and a ghostly figure flashed straight ahead. It was Kagami, controlled by Dustless. As long as I release the power of the Sharingan to control the Kyuubi in Uzumaki Naruto's body, and make him attack Konoha again. Thinking of this, Kagami's lips curled into a cold smile. Now the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha is extremely sensitive, and both sides are full of gunpowder. If the Kyuubi comes out again, and is controlled by the Sharingan, the consequences are self-evident, and I'm afraid that even if Konoha can tolerate it, they won't let the Uchiha go. In this way, the Uchiha will die. Who is it? Several ninjas who were monitoring Uzumaki Naruto saw the black shadow rushing over, and suddenly flocked in front of Kagami. These ninjas were not only Umbu, but also Root. Sharingan, are you from the Uchiha clan? The Umbu ninjas and Root ninjas looked at Uchiha Kagami's 3-tomo Sharingan, and their brows under their masks couldn't help but frown secretly. After all, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha's higher-ups is well known to all. It's good to see it clearly, so you are all the best witnesses. Kagami's mouth twitched into a strange smile, and his 3-tomo Sharingan turned sharply, and in an instant, these ninjas were knocked down. Of course, he didn't kill them. After all, their testimony in the future will be the biggest reason to destroy the Uchiha. After quietly knocking down several people, Kagami immediately entered the room they were guarding. Creak. The door was gently pushed open, and the dark environment was like daytime for Kagami. The furniture and facilities in the room were quite simple, and some of the furniture even had cracks on it. It looked like it had been there for many years. On the ground, there were a lot of cylindrical boxes that were similar to ramen, and there were also a lot of milk bottles. With his excellent vision, Kagami could clearly see that whether it was the ramen or the milk bottles, all of them had expired long ago. In other words, these things were all expired food. It can be seen that Uzumaki Naruto's childhood was so miserable. The dignified fourth Hokage's descendant fell into such a situation. It really makes people sigh at the injustice of the world. Chapter 157. Looking around, Kagami looked at the stairs in front of him. Obviously, it leads to the place where Uzumaki Naruto slept upstairs. Kagami walked over. You're really an optimistic person. I hope you can persist in the future and add some vitality to this boring world. Kagami looked at the sleeping Uzumaki Naruto with his 3 tomo. Kagami was stunned for a moment, then he smiled with relief. This kid is indeed the most charming and bewitching person in the world. The number of people who were defeated by Uzumaki Naruto's mouth is no less than 5. Well, who are you? Seeming to be aware of someone's gaze, Uzumaki Naruto rubbed his sleepy eyes and tried to open them, looking at Kagami's indifferent face in a daze. You actually woke up. Kagami looked at Uzumaki Naruto in surprise, then his eyes flashed with indifference, and he said faintly, "Kid, it's better for you to sleep." After saying that, without waiting for Uzumaki Naruto to answer, he used his Sharingan to make Uzumaki Naruto fall asleep again. This kid is weak because of Kyuubi's interference, and now his ability to resist genjutsu is extremely poor. Kagami's spiritual power also successfully invaded Uzumaki Naruto's spiritual world. Tick-tock tick-tock. The world in his line of sight suddenly changed, and the scene in front of him was completely different from before. It was a strange place made up of countless sewers, and the ground was full of water. Whoosh! At this moment, a strong gust of wind blew towards Kagami's face, causing his clothes to swell up. This gust of wind contained endless killing intent and boundless negative emotions, especially filled with unprecedented hatred. It gave the feeling of an irreconcilable enemy, as if he was full of hatred towards the whole world. This violent chakra. It seems to be Kyuubi. Feeling chakra's calamity, Uchiha Kagami frowned slightly, then looked at the passage in front of him and walked towards it. The nine-tailed beast was the absolute overlord of the tailed beasts. Even though the Ina tribute chakra had been stripped away and only had half of its power left, the amount of chakra was still unimaginable. It was an absolute existence that was unparalleled. Even if it was only a small amount of chakra, it was not inferior to the eight-tailed beast. It might even be more powerful than the eight-tailed beast. It was enough to show how powerful the nine-tailed beast was. Soon, Uchiha Kagami arrived at a spacious place. In front of the red railing, there was an orange monster sleeping leisurely with its 9 tails swaying in the wind. Looking at its expression, it seemed to be quite comfortable. Compared to before, when he was controlled by this monster and had no human rights, animal rights. Although he was imprisoned now, he still had some dignity. Uchiha Kagami, it's been a while since we last met. You sure know how to enjoy life. Appearing in front of the red railing like a ghost, Uchiha Kagami looked at the bound Kyuubi and smiled slightly. He immediately looked at the jutsu on the railing that sealed the Kyuubi, and contempt flashed in his eyes. Who are you? 3 Tomo Sharingan. Are you from the Uchiha clan? Chakra opened its eyes, revealing a huge scarlet eye filled with hatred. Staring at the figure in front of it, the Kyuubi's 9 tails swayed even more casually. You know me? Looking at Uchiha Kyuubi with contempt, its pupils suddenly shrank, emitting a dangerous cold light. Its huge claws slammed on the ground, and the whole space trembled fiercely. The Kyuubi's expression became extremely ferocious. Get over here, let me tear you apart, damn Uchiha brat. Kyuubi's sharp roar exploded like a shockwave, blowing many cracks in the surrounding walls. His scarlet cross eyes emitted monstrous killing intent, and the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. The degree of resentment increased by several levels. If one had to say who the Kyuubi hated the most, it would undoubtedly be the Uchiha clan. The Kyuubi was initially controlled by Uchiha Madara, then by Uchiha Obito, and then by Dustless using the Geto Mazo to extract his Ina tribute chakra. His strength was greatly reduced, so naturally he hated the Uchiha. Don't worry, I will release your seal soon. Uchiha Kyuubi faintly glanced at the Kyuubi, and then whispered. But I have to suppress all your strength. Otherwise, that brat Uzumaki Naruto might be swallowed by you. So you can really escape from this cage. Suppress my strength? The Kyuubi was so angry that he laughed. His body lying on the ground suddenly stood up, revealing his huge body. His scarlet eyes stared at Uchiha Kyuubi's indifferent face, and the tail behind him swayed more wildly, as if laughing at Uchiha Kyuubi's arrogance. Then he stretched out his arm, revealing his sharp claws, and looked at Uchiha Kyuubi contemptuously. With a sneer on his fox-like face, he disdainfully ridiculed. Trash like you, Kyuubi, can kill 5 of you with 1 claw. It's no wonder that the Kyuubi was so angry. He looked at Uchiha Kyuubi angrily. Even when Uchiha Madara defeated him, the Kyuubi expressed his dissatisfaction. In his eyes, Uchiha Madara used the evil Sharingan to control him. Even if he couldn't defeat him, he should at least keep his dignity. Is that so? It seems that you have been living quite leisurely these past few years, and your brain is not working well. You even seem to have forgotten the person who sealed the other half of your strength, Kyuubi. As his words fell, Uchiha Kyuubi's right eye began to distort violently, and the dark blue Tensigen was obvious. Don't tell me you're... Kyuubi's eyes stared at the dark blue luster of the right eye, and suddenly remembered the masked man who forcibly extracted his Yin attribute, Chakra Mazo, a few years ago, and his expression suddenly stiffened. Uchiha Kyuubi's eyes were like torches, and he looked contemptuously at the Kyuubi who was on guard against him. He immediately raised his head slightly and saw the seal above, and his eyes flashed with a touch of frivolity. I will let you out, beast. Chapter 158. Seeing the Kyuubi looking at him with fear, Kagami didn't care and just smiled. He didn't even care about the seal above him. A golden light flashed in his palm as he stared at the red railings in front of him. The golden light cut through the void and destroyed the enchantment that bound the Kyuubi. Ouch! A deafening whistling sound came from the front, bringing with it a scorching wave of air that wreaked havoc like a hurricane. The water flowing on the ground was quickly evaporated. Looking up, Kyuubi saw a giant black Bijidama in his mouth. Useless fellow, this kind of powerless trick is completely useless against me. After so many years, I thought that you would more or less understand my abilities, but it seems that I thought too much. You are still as stupid as before. Looking up, Kyuubi faintly looked at the giant Bijidama and shook his head. He looked at the Kyuubi and then looked away again, turning a deaf ear to the Bijidama. Would release. Would ball jutsu. Boom. 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 Suddenly, a thick green wood ball appeared under the Kyuubi's feet. It wrapped around the Kyuubi like a snake, making him unable to move and quickly absorbing the chakra of the Kyuubi. Since Dustless absorbed the chakra of Hashirama, he awakened the wood release in his body. Since he has the power of both the Uchiha and the Senju, he was even more proficient than Hashirama, the creator of wood release. Crack! The nine-tailed beast opened its huge mouth full of fangs, emitting a foul smell. It then bit at the wood puppet's head, biting off the wood puppet's head that was bound to its body. It's useless. How can wood release be so weak? Seeing Kyuubi's head being bitten off, Kyuubi's face was expressionless. In the blink of an eye, a new Kyuubi's head quickly grew out, binding the Kyuubi with a more powerful and ferocious force. The Kyuubi was like a bottomless black hole, swallowing the Kyuubi's chakra. The orange evil chakra was constantly being devoured by the wood ball, and the Kyuubi's chakra was constantly being absorbed by the wood ball. The Kyuubi's strong body quickly withered, and his expression was extremely sluggish as he fell to the ground powerlessly, like a dead dog. Sure enough, the so-called infinite chakra is just SOSO. Kyuubi's chakra is huge, but it's not unlimited, especially after half of the Kyuubi's chakra was taken away. The Kyuubi's S chakra was even weaker than before. Whoosh! When Kyuubi was about to release the Kyuubi's power, a golden light suddenly flashed past him and went straight towards the Kyuubi. Boom! Looking around, the blue chakra energy ball directly destroyed the wood ball on the Kyuubi's body, and the scattered fragments of the wood ball splashed on the ground like snowflakes. What a haunting man! Namikaze Minato! Looking at the man's back in the distance, especially the Haori behind him that was clearly flowing with the fourth Hokage's shadow, and his golden hair that was as warm as the sun, there was no doubt about his identity. Kyuubi's face was calm, and he was calm. He already knew that Minato would appear, but even if he did, it wouldn't change anything. Are you surprised? The first person to liberate you turned out to be me? Looking at Minato with a smile, Kyuubi teased him. This kid probably thought that the person who should come was Uzumaki Naruto, not Kyuubi. You shouldn't be the masked man from before. His dark blue eyes showed endless wisdom. Minato frowned slightly, and then said very rationally, the difference between Dustless and the person in front of him was too big. You're smart. Kyuubi gently smiled, and he wasn't surprised. Minato was such a keen and smart person. When he confronted Obito, he easily saw the weakness of Kamui. From this, one could see how deep his wisdom was. However, Kyuubi's voice suddenly turned cold, and he said sarcastically, I can tell you clearly that you can't do anything now. Do you think you can still be the savior of the world like before? That's not clear. Minato just smiled gently at Kyuubi's sarcasm, and then looked at Chakra's recovered Kyuubi, and he was relieved. Damn bastard, I will not let you go. Staring at Kyuubi, Kyuubi said fiercely. In fact, he didn't have the confidence, but he still had to keep up appearances. After all, this was Uzumaki Naruto's spiritual world. There was no escape, and Kyuubi was guarding it, so the chance of escaping was almost zero. You won't let me go? Hearing this, Kyuubi sneered at Kyuubi's stupid fox, and he couldn't help but be speechless. It was as if he and Kyuubi's positions were switched. You don't know how to live. Kyuubi frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Kyuubi printed with one hand, and red lines appeared in the corner of his eyes, and a huge natural chakra floated around his body. Senjutsu Bright God Gate. Bang bang bang. Kyuubi, who had just risen, was immediately subdued by the red round wood falling from the sky. His 9 tails were tightly suppressed, and his neck and hands were also suppressed by the red round wood. Kyuubi's awe-inspiring chakra also disappeared, and the chakra that was sealed by the Bright God Gate stopped flowing all over his body, and he became a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. As for Minato, he was even worse. He stayed here to gather chakra, and his existence was similar to a clone. In fact, when he used Rasengan to help Kyuubi escape, he used chakra. So he was directly crushed by the Bright God Gate that fell from the sky. Chapter 159. The Kyuubi's body was tightly bound by the red wooden pillar, and he couldn't move at all. His chakra was imprisoned, and he couldn't mobilize chakra at all. The Kyuubi, known as the Infinite Chakra, became an ordinary beast for a while. Bastard! Kyuubi's face was pale when he noticed that his chakra was drained, and his huge eyes looked at Dustless. He could clearly feel the power of the wood release binding him. Who are you? You have the Rinnegan, Mangekyo, and even the wood release. Although I don't know the origin of that blue eye, I feel that it's not inferior to the Rinnegan. Kyuubi asked gloomily, and he felt that it was unbelievable. There have only been 3 dojutsu in the ninja world since ancient times, but Uchiha Kagami's right eye, that dark blue eye, was obviously not much different from the Rinnegan. You're just a beast, but you're unexpectedly talkative. Looking at the Kyuubi's spittle flying all over the sky, Uchiha Kyuubi seemed to be tired, and he casually found a place to sit down, then gently rubbed his temples with both hands, and after sorting out his thoughts, he looked at the Kyuubi with a smile. Well, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll answer your questions. Looking at the motionless Kyuubi lying on the ground, Uchiha Kyuubi whispered, and when he was about to speak, the Kyuubi's hoarse and cold voice sounded first. If I'm not wrong, you should want to resurrect the Jubi and get the power to fight alongside the 6 paths, but I advise you not to waste your time. The Jubi's power is too strong, and it's not something you can control. The 6 paths was afraid of the power of the Jubi, so he used the Yin-Yang release to split the Jubi into 9-tailed beasts. If the Jubi is resurrected, the world will be destroyed. The Kyuubi said in a depressed tone. As one of the Jubi's forces, he naturally knew the power of the Jubi. Although this is just his guess, He can confirm that Uchiha Kyuubi's goal is the Jubi, and only the huge power of the Jubi can make Uchiha Kyuubi so crazy. Some time ago, the other half of his Yin attribute chakra was sealed by the heretic demon statue, which indirectly explained everything. Did I hear wrongly? As an amalgamation of negative emotions, Ninetales is actually worried about the safety of the entire world. How comical. Looking at Kyuubi's serious face, Kagami's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. This is not something you can worry about. The so-called bijou exists to resurrect the Jubi. Apart from that, do you think the existence of the bijou has any value? Staring at the man-eating Kyuubi, Kagami said indifferently, "This is the essence of the existence of bijou. If it wasn't for the fact that I needed you to resurrect the Jubi, I would have killed you a few years ago." Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Kagami in the Rain Village, sneered. To be honest, if he didn't need the Kyuubi, he would have already disposed of this annoying fox as garbage. You should be happy that you have a part in my script, Kyuubi. Looking down at the murderous Kyuubi, Kagami said inexplicably, giving people a feeling that they didn't understand, but in Kyuubi's ears, it actually meant something else. What do you mean? As the absolute supreme of the bijou, Kyuubi was not only powerful, but also quite intelligent, no worse than humans, so naturally he could understand what Dustless meant, and then he understood Kagami's meaning. That kid shouldn't be of any use to you, at least he absolutely doesn't have this ability now. The kid Kyuubi was talking about was naturally Uzumaki Naruto. Because of his deliberate interference, Naruto's strength was pitifully weak, and he couldn't even use the most basic ninjutsu. Obviously, Kyuubi had no use for someone like Kagami, whose strength was unprecedented, and who could shatter the world with a snap of his fingers. Yes, don't underestimate that kid so much. It's just that he has you in his body, so I spent so much effort. As we all know, only the Uchiha Sharingan can control bijou. Kyuubi smacked his lips, and then said with a sinister smile in his eyes, which made the sluggish Kyuubi feel uncomfortable, "What is your purpose?" Kyuubi looked at Kyuubi puzzledly and asked, "Using the Sharingan to control that kid Uzumaki Naruto to attack Konoha, and all this will be blamed on the Uchiha, don't you think it's interesting?" In the end, Kyuubi's face was full of sneers. The Umbu who guarded Uzumaki Naruto's safety before was the best testimony. They saw with their own eyes that he was an Uchiha clan member. Using the Sharingan to control Uzumaki Naruto to attack Konoha with the power of a bijou, in this way, Konoha's higher-ups will completely tear off their face and attack the Uchiha clan. In order to avoid the outbreak of civil war, Uchiha Itachi will definitely take the initiative to eliminate the Uchiha and join the Akatsuki. Uchiha Itachi will embark on the script that Dustless designed for him. What a vicious plan. Hearing this, Kyuubi's old face changed dramatically, and he took a deep breath. Although he hated the Uchiha clan very much, he couldn't help but sweat for Kyuubi's madness. According to the current situation, Konoha and the Uchiha clan will go to war sooner or later. But now that Uchiha Shirsue's whereabouts are unknown, many Uchiha clan members have already sprouted the idea of retreating, not wanting to go to war with Konoha's higher-ups. Now, Kyuubi is doing this, controlling the bijou that can only be controlled by the Sharingan to attack Konoha again. It can be said that he has completely pushed the Uchiha clan to the edge of the storm, and will completely destroy them. Vicious. Hearing this, Kyuubi sneered again and again, revealing half of his face, and looked at Kyuubi with one eye, and said with a sinister smile, "People like them can sacrifice for my plan. This is the greatest favor that God has given them." Chapter 160. Anyway, the end of the Uchiha clan will be exterminated. It's the supreme honor of their clan to become a crucial part of his plan. You lunatic. Shut up, beast. Kyuubi's eyes were cold, and the Sharingan in his pupils turned sharply. A huge amount of eye power invaded Kyuubi's mind, and he was easily controlled. Kyuubi was just a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered in front of Kyuubi. There was no room for him to fight back. Kyuubi's soul seemed to have been sucked out, and he became extremely obedient, lying on the ground motionless, and his scarlet pupils turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan. Obviously, Kyuubi has been completely controlled by Kagami. Now it's time to control the little devil with my Sharingan. In the empty world, Kyuubi's long sigh sounded, and then his whole body glowed with golden light. In less than a breath, Kyuubi disappeared completely, leaving only Kyuubi with a calm face. Kyuubi's sight suddenly changed back to the room where Uzumaki Naruto was sleeping. Little devil, get up. As Uchiha Kagami's voice fell, Uzumaki Naruto opened his eyes. His dark blue eyes were gray, without any vitality. Obviously, he was deliberately controlled by Uchiha Kagami. It seems that there shouldn't be any accidents. After looking down at Uzumaki Naruto's body, Kyuubi nodded with satisfaction, and immediately launched his eye power again. Uzumaki Naruto's body suddenly froze, his pupils enlarged and turned into the same three-tomo Sharingan. There's still one more level. With a strange smile on his face, Kyuubi printed with one hand. After a long silence, Uzumaki Naruto's body suddenly covered with a fiery red chakra coat. Uzumaki Naruto's expression instantly became ferocious, and the beard on both sides of his face became long and thick. His pupils stared at Kyuubi, and his breathing became abnormally heavy. His whole body was full of extremely powerful killing intent. It's enough to keep 3 tails. Too many will only be counterproductive. Looking down at the 3 red tails on Uzumaki Naruto's body, Kagami nodded slightly. Although he can control the Kyuubi to release more power to Uzumaki Naruto, there is a chance that the Kyuubi will break out of the seal, and the easier it is to make a mistake, the more power of the Kyuubi will be given to Uzumaki Naruto, which means that he will need more power. I'm looking forward to your performance, Uzumaki Naruto. Looking at Uzumaki Naruto with his fangs and 3-tomo Sharingan, Uchiha Kagami smiled slightly. I'm afraid that after this incident, this kid will be even more disliked by Konoha. Go. Whoosh. Naruto Uzumaki Naruto, or Dustless who is behind Naruto Kyuubi's, and Shursan, Dustless Naruto, who is Shursan Shisubi. Is Naruto Sho, Shursan Shursui or Shursui is Naruto, and the Uchiha clan controlling the Kyuubi to attack Root Danzo. Although it is somewhat unreasonable, it is at least reasonable. The Uchiha clan doesn't like Danzo, and Danzo also doesn't like the Uchiha clan. It's not like the two sides have never fought in the past. This time, the Uchiha clan controlling the Kyuubi is also reasonable. Boom. Boom. Looking into the distance, in the area of the root space, a huge mushroom cloud suddenly appeared in the void. In an instant, the dark night sky was dyed crimson red. The temperature instantly increased by more than 100 times, and the blazing heat wave that burst out was even more destructive. It was like a magnitude 10 earthquake, directly shaking the entire Konoha. The crimson flames dyed the sky of Konoha red. A young man with a red coat and 3 tails behind him raged like a ghost. As the leader of Root, Shimura Danzo was awakened for the first time. He quickly climbed to the window and looked at the crimson night sky in the distance, and his old face directly turned green. He quickly tidied up his clothes and rushed to Root's base. No matter who you are, this old man will tear you to pieces. In the dark night sky, Shimura Danzo didn't even call his guards, and rushed alone to the center of the incident. Root is his life's work, and it must not be destroyed. At the same time, the deafening explosion just now awakened the entire Konoha, and the people who were sleeping quickly got dressed and prepared to hide in the tunnels prepared by their homes. A few years ago, Dustless and Obito attacked Konoha, especially Dustless's meteorite shower, which shocked everyone in Konoha, from the Hokage to the ordinary people, so everyone started to dig tunnels. The power is a bit weak. If it was the Kyuubi's Bijidama, I'm afraid Konoha would have been blown up. Looking at the big pit caused by the Bijidama explosion in the distance, Uchiha Kagami shook his head and said regretfully, and then disappeared from Uzumaki Naruto's room, leaving nothing in the empty room. The agile fiery red shadow roared unscrupulously. At this moment, Uzumaki Naruto no longer looked like a human being. He was completely devoured by Kyuubi. He killed everyone he saw and destroyed everything. He was like a killing machine harvesting the lives of the Root members. This is the Kyuubi. Danzo rushed over and looked at the miserable state of Root, and he was furious, and immediately looked at the figure in the distance, wearing a crimson coat and spewing out the evil chakra, and his face was extremely ugly. The power of the Kyuubi is known all over the world. Fortunately, its 3 tails otherwise. Thinking of this, Shimura Danzo's back was cold, and he couldn't help but feel a chill. The power of the Kyuubi has no limit, and it can easily destroy Konoha's ninja village. I can take this opportunity to absorb the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki into my root. With a flash of light in his mind, Shimura Danzo's eyes narrowed slightly, and after looking at the Kyuubi for a while, his expression suddenly stiffened. Isn't that the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan? Chapter 161. Returning to his senses, Shimura Danzo angrily looked at Uzumaki Naruto's 3-tomo Sharingan. He saw the tragedy of Root, and his face twitched fiercely. His anger was like an erupting volcano, and his mind was constantly being burned by his anger. Shimura Danzo gritted his teeth, and a terrifying black smoke appeared behind him. Decades of hard work turned into ashes. How could he not be angry? Danzo, this is... The Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi also arrived in time, and when he saw the Root corpses everywhere, he couldn't help but take a deep breath, and he asked gloomily, "Who did this?" The Sandaime's tone was full of anger and surprise, and his old face was also extremely ugly, but in his heart, he was very happy. Although the death of the Root clan's members caused a great loss to Konoha's strength, there was no war at the moment, and Konoha's population was more than enough. And these ninjas could be replaced in a few years. Anyway, Root didn't obey the orders of the Hokage, and only listened to the orders of Shimura Danzo. Even if Shimura Danzo asked Root to assassinate him, these people wouldn't hesitate to do it. It can be said that Root is the biggest hidden danger of Konoha. Who is it? Look at who it is. Hearing this, Shimura Danzo looked at Sandaime Hokage with an annoyed expression, then pointed at Uzumaki Naruto and said coldly, "The Uchiha clan is indeed the biggest unstable factor in the village. They must be eliminated," Shimura Danzo said with unprecedented determination, and his tone was resolute, without the slightest sign of retreat, which made the Sandaime frown deeply, and he also looked at Naruto. Naruto, he turned out to be controlled by the Sharingan. Sandaime Hokage looked at Naruto's vague silhouette in surprise. At this moment, he was completely swallowed by the power of the bijou, but his scarlet eyes were very recognizable. His eyes flashed with a hint of understanding. Danzo and the Uchiha didn't deal with each other, and now that the Uchiha used the Sharingan to control the Kyuubi, how could he not be angry? There may be other reasons for this. After the mysterious disappearance of Uchiha Shursui, although the Uchiha were still unusually restless, they were no longer as excessive as before. Now that the Uchiha suddenly launched an attack, the third Hokage had to consider other aspects. "Calm down, maybe there's something else." The Sandaime tried to persuade Shimura Danzo, but he was interrupted by Shimura Danzo. "Calm down my ass." Shimura Danzo's anger, and he was like a hungry wolf, and he bit by bit he said with hatred, "Sarutobi, facts speak louder than words. You know Uzumaki Naruto's eyes, Naruto Uzumaki Naruto's eyes. This Naruto's eyes is Naruto Uzumaki's Naruto's Sharingan, and SSS and Naruto. Naruto's eyes. Eyes. Humph, I'm telling you, even if you don't agree, I will join forces with the 2 advisors to destroy the Uchiha." Seeing that Sarutobi was still hesitating, Shimura Danzo's heart hardened, and he said with a murderous look on his face, "A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. The Uchiha clan will not be spared." Boom. The small black Bijudama roared again, and suddenly, a huge pit appeared on the ground, and the soil splashed everywhere, taking the lives of many unimportant people. "We'll talk about the Uchiha later, for now we need to take him down." Sandaime Hokage didn't want to provoke Danzo. This old guy is one of the strongest people in the world. It's impossible to make him back down. Instead of wasting his breath, it's better to take down Uzumaki Naruto, who is controlled by the Sharingan. "You don't need to tell me this, I understand." After glancing at Sarutobi coldly, Shimura Danzo retracted his gaze and looked at Uzumaki Naruto coldly. His murderous intent surged out of his body as he took the initiative to rush toward Uzumaki Naruto. His body was like a reservoir that was constantly overflowing with chakra. He didn't hold back at all. Obviously, he was serious. It seems that things are troublesome. Lowering the brim of the Hokage's hat and looking at Shimura Danzo, Sarutobi's eyes flashed with a headache. This just shows that this incident has completely enraged him. And there's no room for negotiation. Let's take it one step at a time. The Sandaime couldn't think of a good plan. He could only sigh, and then he rushed toward Uzumaki Naruto. Unfortunately, the show is coming to an end. Uchiha Kagami, who was secretly watching from a distance, naturally saw the movements of the Sandaime and Danzo. The strength of these two people is quite good, especially the Sandaime, who has the title of ninjutsu professor. His strength is unfathomable. Facing a group of strong people from Konoha, Uzumaki Naruto, who only has 3 tails, will definitely lose. But the plan is finally completed. Next, Konoha will attack Konoha, and Uchiha Itachi will eliminate the Uchiha clan in order to avoid civil war in Konoha. As a condition, Uchiha Sasuke cannot be killed. Uchiha Kagami muttered to himself, and then he smiled faintly, and his body quickly disappeared, turning into a golden light that penetrated into the void and disappeared. The Kyuubi was once again controlled by the Sharingan to attack Konoha, and at such a sensitive moment, the Uchiha clan can't stay out of it, especially before controlling Uzumaki Naruto. Uchiha Kagami deliberately left a few people alive, and these people's testimonies will be the best evidence for the Uchiha clan. All in all, the Uchiha clan has been completely pushed to hell, and no one can save them. The Uchiha clan can only break their teeth and swallow this matter. Not to mention that they were already suspected. Chapter 162. The next morning, the sun shone brightly for thousands of miles. The warm sun poured down from the 9 heavens, nourishing all living things. The entire world seemed to be in a flourishing state. However, Konoha's ninja village was gloomy. Inside the Hokage's office, there was a dense atmosphere. Looking around, all of the high-level people of Konoha were present. They were definitely the best people in Konoha, and if they stomped their feet, Konoha would tremble. Uchiha clan must be eradicated. Shimura Danzo was the first to lose his cool and roared hysterically. Although this old guy usually gave people the impression of being the scheming type, because of the tragic loss of Root yesterday, he completely went berserk. How's Naruto's condition? Sandaime, who was calmly smoking a cigarette, suddenly asked with a soft and caring tone, which reduced the tension a lot. It seems that there is no problem. Udatane Koharu, one of the 2 consultants, said, and then looked at the other consultant, Mitokado Hamura, who nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. Sarutobi, I suggest that we implement Danzo's order and immediately deal with the Uchiha. Creak. However, at this moment, the door of the Hokage's office was suddenly pushed open, revealing a handsome young man wearing an umbu uniform with a slender tachi on his back. Sarutobi, what do you mean? Shimura Danzo looked at Sandaime Hokage with an unkind expression. They were originally on the same level, and because of Uzumaki Naruto's destruction yesterday, Shimura Danzo's tone was naturally very harsh, especially after seeing the young man in front of him. His eyes were filled with anger. The ninja wearing the umbu uniform was Uchiha Itachi. Itachi, you came, sit down. Ignoring Shimura Danzo's dissatisfaction, the Hokage smiled kindly at Itachi. His old face showed a kind and gentle smile, giving the feeling of a neighbor's grandfather. Pretentious old man, you're better at acting than me. Don't think I don't know that you used this method to deceive Uchiha Dustless. Seeing that the relationship between the Hokage and Itachi was so harmonious, Shimura Danzo sneered in his heart. He glanced at Itachi, then retracted his gaze and closed his eyes. Hiruzen, what do you mean by this? Staring at the indifferent Uchiha Itachi, one of the 2 consultants, Mitokado Hamura's face was ugly. He just wanted to persuade the Hokage to deal with the Uchiha clan, but the Hokage called the Uchiha in front of him, which was tantamount to a slap in his face. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Mitokado Hamura looked at the Hokage. Don't worry about such details. Itachi is one of us. He is the same as Uchiha Goku, Shursui, and his big brother Uchiha Goku. His vision has jumped out of the narrow-minded clansman, and is sincerely for the people of the village. The Hokage smiled faintly and waved his hand with great momentum, and Mitokado Hamura was silent. Uchiha Kagami, the Hokage, Shimura Danzo, Udatane, and Mitokado Hamura were all people of the same generation, and they were also part of the same group. Uchiha Kagami was Uchiha Shirsue's father, and his vision jumped out of the narrow Uchiha clan, and sincerely served Konoha. Unfortunately, he died in the First Shinobi World War. As his son, Uchiha Shirsue also inherited the will of Uchiha Kagami and chose to serve Konoha. As for Uchiha Dustless, Itachi's eldest brother, he sincerely helped Konoha, and with his own strength he destroyed thousands of sand ninjas and pulled Konoha from the edge of hell. His contribution was even greater than Uchiha Kagami and Shirsue's. It's a pity that Dustless was killed by the Akatsuki, the mercenary organization hired by the Rock Village. Otherwise, in the future, he would have been a giant tree that could support Konoha. The Hokage said bitterly. If it weren't for Dustless destroying the Sand Village, maybe Konoha would have been erased from the map by now. Don't you know Dustless, Itachi? Looking at Itachi's confused face, it seemed like he understood but also didn't understand. The Hokage asked curiously. In any case, Dustless is Itachi's eldest brother. Even if they are strangers, even if they have never seen each other's face, it shouldn't be like this, as if it's the first time he heard about him. Even Shimura Danzo and Konoha's two consultants looked at Itachi strangely. That's not it. Itachi shook his head. He also asked Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto about Dustless's deeds, but both of them were silent. Mikoto's face was full of complex guilt, but Fugaku's expression was worth studying. Sometimes it was hatred, sometimes it was complicated, sometimes it was regret, sometimes it was sighing. In short, it was almost all kinds of expressions that Itachi could describe. Therefore, Itachi didn't know much about Dustless's deeds, and what he knew was just hearsay. He only knew that Dustless was the first person to awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan in the history of Konoha, and that he destroyed the Sand Village with overwhelming power, and was praised as a great hero who saved Konoha, but later he was besieged and killed. You only have yourself to blame, you can't blame others. Seeing that Itachi didn't know anything, Shimura Danzo immediately sneered. It was obvious that Fugaku deliberately concealed his grievances with Dustless and had a contemptuous attitude. Danzo was very disdainful of Fugaku's actions. If Dustless stayed in the Uchiha clan, Shimura Danzo swore that he would never do anything to the Uchiha. Well, I will explain to you some of the deeds of your brother Dustless. The Hokage smiled slightly, and immediately fell into his memories, and began to recall the past of Dustless. Chapter 163. Hearing that Sandaime Hokage was going to introduce him to Wuchin's story, Itachi became interested. He was naturally very curious about his elder brother, whom he had never met in his life, and his parents avoided talking about him. Although Itachi was usually indifferent to fame and fortune, and the so-called reputation was like floating clouds, and he had no distractions, the people around him inevitably compared him with Uchiha Wuchin, and inevitably had an indescribable attachment to Wuchin in his heart. Dustless. The Sandaime began to recall Dustless's past, and after a while he suddenly shook his head and said softly, Dustless is a poor child and some things are related to his and Fugaku's private affairs, I can't say. He is similar to Madara in the past. Both of them are people who pursue power very much. Of course, this is also related to your parents. Itachi heard this and nodded. Although Fugaku avoided some things, he was good at thinking, and combined with other people's words, it wasn't difficult to come up with a theory. Dustless is very strong. If it wasn't for Inoki's despicable tricks, I'm afraid no one would be his opponent. And the people of Akatsuki are also unfathomable. They could even kill Dustless. The Sandaime said with a heavy tone. Dustless was stronger than him, but the leader of Akatsuki was able to kill Dustless. His strength was self-evident. He even mercilessly said that if he could kill Wuchin, he could also kill him, the third Hokage. Sandaime-sama means, Uchiha Itachi is also a smart person, and his mind is agile. Compared to Sandaime, who is over 50 years old, he is naturally much smarter. His eyes flashed with understanding. Sandaime wants me to enter the Akatsuki. This kid is quite smart. Shimura Danzo and Konoha's two advisors looked at each other, and they could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. At the same time, their eyes lit up as they thought that Itachi's plan to infiltrate the Akatsuki was indeed a good one. Although the identity of the people who attacked Konoha a few years ago is unknown, but judging from all the signs, there is no doubt that the people who attacked Konoha are the Akatsuki, because the 5 great shinobi villages were destroyed after the war, and they don't have the ability to do so. Only the Akatsuki, who can even kill Dustless, has the ability to do so. There is also the Uchiha clan. Speaking of this, Sandame's expression was also extremely complicated. If it weren't for the situation, he would never have issued such a cruel and cold order. After all, the Uchiha have been following the footsteps of Konoha since the beginning of its establishment, and their contributions over the past few decades are known to the world. If it weren't for the Uchiha, maybe Konoha would have already fallen apart. Now that he has to personally order the destruction of the Uchiha clan, he really can't do it. After all, even if the Uchiha clan didn't make any contributions over the years, they have worked hard, but the current situation forced him to make a decision again. Well, Sarutobi, what are you hesitating for? The Uchiha clan is a malignant tumor of evil, and the biggest unstable factor in the peace and stability of Konoha. They must be eliminated. Seeing that the Sandame was still hesitating, Shimura Danzo immediately stood up and said to Uchiha Itachi, "The Umbu members guarding Uzumaki Naruto were not killed. They have already provided testimony that the murderer is a member of the Uchiha clan. This is an irrefutable fact." Hearing this, Itachi was silent, and his heart was struggling. On one side is the Uchiha clan that he grew up in, and on the other side is the Konoha that he is loyal to. Looking at Itachi with a complicated expression, Sandame couldn't help but sigh. How could he not understand Itachi's dilemma? Danzo's words just now undoubtedly meant that Itachi should immediately stand on Konoha's side and slaughter the Uchiha's army. After saying that, Shimura Danzo, Udatane, and Minato Haruka stared at Uchiha Itachi with cold light flashing in their eyes. As long as Itachi refuses their conditions, they will step forward to eliminate him. I advise you not to have any ideas. Itachi's sharp and dark eyes swept across the 3 of them as he said this. Although there was no ki erupting from his body, being stared at by those beast-like eyes made the 3 of them feel uneasy, and the chakra around their bodies disappeared. Danzo, Udatane Koharu and Haruka, you have disappointed me too much. Sandame's eyes were gloomy, and he looked at the 3 of them with displeasure, especially the 2 advisors of Shimura Danzo, and there was an unspeakable disgust in his eyes. This is for the future of Konoha. Have you forgotten what Tobirama-sama said? Shimura Danzo looked at the Sandame without any fear, and his old eyes flashed with a scorching light as he said coldly, "If this continues, sooner or later, a war will break out in the village, and Konoha will become the food of other major powers." Hearing Shimura Danzo's words, Sandame's expression suddenly stiffened. Indeed, as Shimura Danzo said, although his tone was a bit exaggerated, it was true. If they don't deal with the Uchiha clan first, and give them a chance to resist, the consequences will definitely not be something that Konoha, who has just emerged from the shadows, can bear. I can promise you to destroy the Uchiha clan, but I have one condition you must. Condition? Ridiculous. Do you think you are qualified to talk to us about conditions? Too naive, Uchiha Itachi. Shimura Danzo looked at Itachi with disdain, and the sneer on the corner of his mouth wasn't concealed at all. The son of the patriarch who was about to be exterminated actually dared to talk about conditions with them without even understanding the most basic situation. Is that so? Itachi's gaze suddenly turned back, and his blood-red eyes swept past Shimura Danzo, and 3 scarlet tomo condensed in his pupils, turning into the Manjikyu Sharingan of the Great Windmill. If you don't agree, I don't mind standing on the side of the Uchiha clan. Uchiha Sasuke can't do anything to him otherwise. After that, chakra materialized around Itachi's body, and a dark red luster covered him. It was Kinsusanu. Chapter 164. Shimura Danzo stared at the Manjikyu Sharingan in astonishment. Obviously, he didn't expect that Itachi would also open the Manjikyu Sharingan. His eyes flashed with greed. It was precisely because he yearned for the Manjikyu Sharingan of Uchiha that he plotted against him. It turned out to be the Manjikyu Sharingan. If he really stands on the side of the Uchiha, it will inevitably cause a qualitative change. Once a civil war breaks out, I don't know who will win. No, I can't let him stand on the side of the Uchiha clan. Sandame's old face quickly changed, and he secretly thought. His old eyes flashed, and he quickly made a decision. If Itachi is really forced to the side of the Uchiha clan, after the war starts, Konoha will really suffer a great loss. Especially Itachi, who is Dustless's younger brother. Even if his dojutsu is not as good as Dustless, he won't be too weak. Moreover, Itachi's talent is also well known all over the world, and he is no worse than Dustless. State your conditions, Itachi. Taking a deep breath, Sandame's tone was firm. At the same time, he didn't forget to glare at Danzo, indicating that he shouldn't talk nonsense. If Itachi is really forced to the side of the Uchiha clan, the gains won't make up for the losses. Thank you, Sandame. Itachi breathed a sigh of relief and then said in a deep voice, after the destruction of the Uchiha clan, Konoha must treat my brother, Uchiha Sasuke, well, and don't tell him the truth. If there's one person Itachi cares about the most, it's undoubtedly Sasuke. In his short life, he almost always thinks about his brother. Is that all? No problem. I promise to treat Sasuke well, and I won't let him be threatened in any way. Sandame nodded heavily. He didn't expect Uchiha Sasuke's condition to be so simple. And it's not without benefits to keep Uchiha Sasuke in the village. On the contrary, Uchiha Sasuke can serve the village more and care more about the village, and Uchiha Sasuke is also a genius. His eldest brother and second brother are geniuses. There is no reason for him to be a waste. I hope so. Hearing that Itachi's conditions weren't worth mentioning, Shimura Danzo and the two advisors' frown brows also relaxed. If this kind of trivial matter can let Itachi continue to be tied to Konoha, obviously, they will still make a profit. I will contact the people of that organization as soon as possible. Itachi's brows also relaxed. And then he remembered the Uchiha clan for so many years, and his eyes were full of gloominess. Even if Dustless was cold, he couldn't kill Fugaku and his wife just because he wanted to. This made it more difficult for Itachi, who had always respected them, to kill them. It's a pity. My Sharingan. This means Itachi's. S's and that means he wants T's SS will give him. And it's worth considering that Itachi, the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless, can't be weak. As the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless, Itachi can't be weak. Over the years, there's been a puzzle in my heart. Staring at the Sandame, the wisdom in Itachi's eyes converged and was replaced by confusion and even hesitation. Just say it, Itachi. The Sandame said with a smile. Itachi has agreed to his conditions, and the biggest haze in his heart has disappeared. It's like a mountain of tens of thousands of pounds on his back has disappeared. And his body is extraordinarily light and powerful. Uchiha Dustless, is he really dead? Finally, Itachi asked the question in his heart. He frowned slightly and asked the Sandame directly. This question has been bothering him for many years. Dustless's strength is almost deified by Konoha. How can such an unprecedented character die so easily? The smile on the Sandame's face suddenly stiffened, and his face inevitably became gloomy. He had doubts about this issue before, and suspected that Dustless was just seriously injured and hiding somewhere to recuperate. But after so many years, there was no news, and he also thought that Dustless was dead. Well, that kid must be dead. Shimura Danzo heard this and interjected with a tone full of certainty. He firmly believed that Dustless was killed by Uzumaki Nagato. After all, Hanzo the Salamander was killed by Uzumaki Nagato, and the Rinnegan is above the Sharingan. Danzo thought that it was reasonable for Dustless to be killed. Itachi was silent. He didn't know why, but he always felt that Dustless was not dead. That indescribable feeling was especially strong after Shisui was killed last time. Of course, he didn't tell the higher-ups of Konoha about Shisui's death. 3 days later, Rain Village. That kid finally agreed to join the Akatsuki. It took a lot of effort. Looking at the world in the rain, Dustless's voice was unusually indifferent. And beside him was Uchiha Obito. Yes. Obito nodded and frowned slightly, wondering. The reason is that the Kyuubi broke out again, and I heard that it was controlled by the Uchiha clan. So Itachi agreed to the request of the higher-ups of Konoha to destroy the Uchiha clan. However, his condition for joining the Akatsuki is that we are not allowed to do anything to Konoha. It doesn't matter, Obito. Our recent plans have nothing to do with Konoha anyway. Dustless's mouth under the mask showed a scheming smile, and then he suddenly said, "When the time comes, I will personally go to Konoha to welcome Itachi." Obito heard this and looked at Dustless in surprise. It's not that there weren't people who joined the Akatsuki over the years, but Dustless, Kisame, Kakuzu, and even Sasori and Orochimaru didn't appear in person. However, Obito was too lazy to ask more. Dustless's presence was the best to prevent some unexpected changes. Chapter 165. Under the dark night sky, a slender, thin, and lonely figure walked alone on the street, looking at the peaceful crowd in front of him. Itachi's heart completely fell to the bottom, and his eyes were full of tears, even if he hid it very well. People are not plants. How can they be emotionless? What's more, Itachi is the kind of person who values friendship very much. How can he destroy his family, or even kill his parents? Can't do it, Itachi. At this moment, the space around Itachi suddenly distorted, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, stirring up waves of ripples, quite mysterious. In the blink of an eye, the mysterious man with a monocular mask flashed strangely out of thin air. This person was wearing a black trench coat embroidered with red clouds. His whole body was airtight, and only one of his eyes could be seen. "I hope you will keep your promise." His pupils shrank, looking at the mysterious man who appeared in front of him. Itachi said calmly, giving people the feeling that there was no breath of life. He was like a walking corpse in human skin, completely losing his soul, without the meaning of existence, just like a dead body. Perhaps for the current Uchiha Itachi, he was already dead. What a strange ninjutsu. It should be in the category of space ninjutsu, and it looks much weirder than those space ninjutsu. Itachi's eyes swept over the mysterious masked man, and his heart inevitably sank. He didn't expect the Akatsuki to be so mysterious and extraordinary. Even such a character exists. Looking at the world, there are definitely not many people who can use space ninjutsu. Even since the death of the fourth Hokage, no one in the world has heard of anyone who can use space ninjutsu. Maybe he was really killed by the people of this organization. Recalling the cause of Dustless's death in his mind, Itachi suddenly made a decision, and he had a deeper understanding of the danger of the Akatsuki, and there was more fear in his eyes. Of course, they will never do anything to Konoha. The mysterious man smiled, indicating that Itachi didn't need to worry, and then said, "The goal of the Akatsuki is not Konoha, not now, and definitely not in the future. It's just that it might be when you die." A cold smile appeared on his face under the mask, and the masked man secretly added in his heart, "This agreement is useful when Itachi is alive, but it's useless when he's dead. That would be best." Staring at the crowd in front of him, Itachi's eyes flashed fiercely. The sharp tachi on his back was unsheathed, and the cold light was refracted. His scarlet eyes had a demonic luster. At this moment, Itachi restrained all his humanity. He had become a human-shaped machine that only knew how to kill and destroy. So, like a ghost, a shadow rushed out and charged towards the crowd in front of him. He raised his hand and slashed down mercilessly, causing beautiful snowflakes to splash all over the ground. "Ah, what a cold man, don't you think so, Obito?" Next to the one-eyed masked man, a ghostly shadow flashed out of thin air, looking at the Uchiha clan members who were being slaughtered in front of him, with a wicked smile on his face. His dark eyes were full of interest as he watched Uchiha Itachi mercilessly slaughtering the Uchiha. The one who came was Dustless. "But it's really a perfect work. He's destined to live in my shadow for the rest of his life." Dustless's mouth was muttering something, and Uchiha Obito was confused. He didn't understand what it meant. What's the matter with this guy? Why do I have this feeling every time? Secretly clenching his fists, Obito glanced at Dustless from the corner of his eyes, and his heart was particularly depressed. That strange way of appearing just now was obviously not a space ninjutsu, but it felt faster than space ninjutsu. After taking a deep breath and calming down his complicated emotions, Obito also began to think about the origin of Dustless. Although Madara once said that Dustless can be trusted, he still couldn't help but be curious. Especially Dustless's strength, Obito felt powerless every time he faced him. Although he trained himself a lot over the years, he always felt that he would be instantly defeated by Dustless. A few years ago, when Dustless defeated Hashirama, this feeling was even stronger. This is a person more terrifying than Madara. Itachi's strength is really good, and he will definitely be the biggest help in catching the Bijou in the future, Obito said to the masked Dustless. He looked again at the Uchiha who were almost slaughtered by Itachi and nodded with satisfaction. He was so strong without using the Manjikyu Sharingan, almost like a wolf in a flock of sheep. After opening the Manjikyu Sharingan, no one would be his opponent. Not bad. Dustless nodded slightly. Itachi's strength was obvious to all. If it weren't for the disease, his future achievements would definitely not be weaker than Sasuke. In the dark night sky, Uchiha Itachi was like the god of death waving his scythe, sweeping through the Uchiha clan with an almost invincible momentum. Although many ninjas resisted, they were mercilessly killed on the spot. In the face of the godlike Uchiha Itachi, the Uchiha clan had almost no power to fight back. The gap between them was too big, completely different. At this moment, Itachi was different from his usual gentle and well-behaved self. His temperament was as cold as a demon. Even if the baby in front of him didn't have the strength to resist, he would still sweep his sword and kill them. Soon the Uchiha clan was slaughtered by Itachi. Except for Sasuke, who was still outside, almost all the clan members were killed by him. Next, it's your turn. Looking at the largest building in the Uchiha base and the bloody scene, Itachi's heart was like being stabbed by a needle, but he still gritted his teeth and walked over. That was where the Uchiha Fugaku couple lived. Chapter 166. Itachi walked towards Fugaku's mansion with a heavy heart. Looking around, almost the entire Uchiha clan's residence was filled with a strong smell of blood, and the tragic scene of corpses everywhere was particularly shocking, as if they had come to hell. Whether men or women, old or young, they were all lying in a pool of blood. The blood-red light shrouded the Uchiha clan's residence, and the scene was tragic. The sky was particularly dim, and the sun and the moon were dim. The entire place was filled with unprecedented desolation. The huge Uchiha clan had completely withdrawn from the stage, and the glory of the past had turned into nothing, vanishing into thin air, becoming a thing of the past. Their feelings were pitiful, and their actions were excusable, but their crimes were punishable. As the most powerful clan in Konoha, the Uchiha clan was naturally superior to other clans, and they spoke with a sense of arrogance that was above others, and it was inevitable that they would offend other clans. This was one of the reasons why even if the entire clan was destroyed, no other clan would speak up for them. A pitiful person must have a pitiful side. Looking at Itachi's back, Obito sneered coldly. Even if he was also an Uchiha, he didn't have a good impression of these so-called clansmen, and whether they lived or died had nothing to do with him. Suddenly, a strong fluctuation swept through his eyes, and the space in front of him suddenly became like a deep-sea whirlpool, sucking Obito's body into it. Glancing at Obito who had disappeared, Dustless was about to leave, but suddenly there was a feeling of electric shock in his body. It's really ironic. It turns out that I still have a conscience. Looking at Itachi's receding figure, Dustless laughed bitterly under the mask, and suddenly there was a throbbing in his body that had never appeared before, and it stopped him from taking a step forward. Looking at Itachi's receding figure with a complicated expression, Dustless also turned into a streamer and rushed straight towards him. In the dark room, one couldn't even see their own fingers, and from time to time, there would be a cold wind blowing, adding a sense of horror to the atmosphere. especially the cold light that passed by from time to time. It was especially gloomy and terrifying, and the soul would tremble incomparably. Creak. The classic Japanese-style sliding door was gently pulled open, revealing a vague and deep outline. The tachi in his hand was stained with blood, reflecting the calm and emotionless face. It was Uchiha Itachi. You're here, Itachi. It seems that you've chosen to join their side. Fugaku sat quietly, looking at the bloody tachi in Itachi's hand. He smiled with relief, giving people the feeling that he had seen through life and death. His tone showed that he no longer cared about the world. Hearing this, Itachi just stared at Fugaku in silence. He lowered his head, and his eyes flashed with a complicated light. His eyes moved slightly and fell on Mikoto. Skunk, you're a good boy. Seeing Itachi looking at her, Mikoto smiled gently. Her gentle smile gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. Clang. Itachi's body suddenly trembled, and the blood-stained sword in his hand fell to the ground uncontrollably. Itachi's teary eyes were reflected on the cold sword. All kinds of emotions poured into his heart, and the tears in Itachi's eyes burst out uncontrollably. This was the only time in his life that he shed tears. It's not your fault. Maybe this is redemption in disguise. Seeing the blood-stained tachi fall to the ground, Fugaku's expression became more complicated, and then he closed his eyes with guilt. It was because of him that the Uchiha clan ended up in this situation today, which made Itachi live a miserable life in the middle of a wall. It's all my fault. I'm not a qualified father. Uchiha Fugaku's face was full of self-blame and regret. If he hadn't coveted the position of Hokage too much, he wouldn't have been blinded by greed. Perhaps he wouldn't have led to today's tragedy, and Uchiha Itachi wouldn't have led to such a miserable life. Dustless was like this, and so was Itachi. Suddenly looking back, Fugaku suddenly felt that he was living in a world of genjutsu. He was alone and had no goals. His two sons also left him because of his mistakes. I worked hard all my life, but in exchange for such an ending, sad and ridiculous. At this point, Uchiha Fugaku finally realized that he had been living like a puppet in the shadow of power all his life, just like a walking corpse. Do it, Itachi. If you don't do it, the guys in Konoha won't let you go, Fugaku said in a deep voice. Staring at Itachi's handsome face, a proud smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You are the biggest pride of my life. And the stupidest thing I did in my life was to drive away Dustless. After that, he closed his eyes in despair. Fugaku was silent. Looking at his life, the stupidest thing he did was to drive his son Dustless out of the family. Itachi, you must take good care of Sasuke. He's still young, only a few years old this year. It's a pity that his birthday is coming. Please say sorry to him for me and Fugaku. Mikoto said softly. She always had a kind smile on her face. She was very quiet, and no matter when she was so kind and kind. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it. Dustless, who was secretly observing, took off his mask, revealing his handsome face. He stared at Mikoto's gentle eyes, and his deep black eyes flashed with sadness. Once upon a time, Uchiha Mikoto also looked at Dustless with such eyes, but looking at the current state of Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto, she didn't know why she couldn't bring up the slightest bit of hatred. Chapter 167. Staring at the faces of Uchiha Mikoto and Fugaku, Dust's hatred suddenly disappeared. Especially towards Uchiha Mikoto, from the beginning to the end, he didn't have much hatred towards her. Do it, Itachi. At this moment, Uchiha Fugaku's voice sounded, and his tone was extremely firm. Even Dustless, who was secretly observing, frowned. He didn't expect this old man to be so unafraid of death. Immediately looking up, Dustless could clearly see that Itachi once again picked up the tachi that fell on the ground, and walked towards the Uchiha couple. Puchi. In the dark room, a cold light flashed in midair, and suddenly two beautiful and narrow snowflakes appeared. Dustless, who had excellent vision, saw the Uchiha Fugaku couple fall to the ground one after another and die on the spot. Goodbye. After looking at the Uchiha couple expressionlessly for a while, Itachi's pupils were as calm as stagnant water. There was no emotion, not even the slightest. After a few moments of sluggishness, Itachi turned around and left, quickly disappearing into the dark space. At the same time, Dustless also came out of the dark space. His deep black eyes swept over the two bodies. Dustless was silent for a moment, and after a while he was about to leave, but his feet seemed to be tightly bound by thousands of pounds of meteorite iron, and he couldn't move. Things are really unpredictable. I didn't expect that I would have the opportunity to use that jutsu, and on the person I hate the most. With a self-deprecating smile, Dustless shook his head helplessly. His left eye suddenly changed and twisted, and the purple Rinnegan suddenly appeared, with 9 mysterious black tomo hanging on the black coil. Dustless's momentum rose sharply, and with one hand print he looked at the dead Uchiha couple. His eyes suddenly solidified, and the Rinnegan rippled. Outer Path. Rinnegan Tensei Jutsu. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku's bodies emitted an emerald green brilliance, stopping above the two, and then slowly drilling into their bodies. Looking around, the sword wounds on Fugaku and Mikoto's bodies began to heal quickly, leaving no trace behind. Even the wounds on their bodies were healed, and the wounds were healed, leaving no trace behind. Rinnegan Tensei Jutsu is one of the most powerful forbidden jutsu of the Rinnegan, and it is also the most powerful resurrection jutsu so far. Using this jutsu is extremely risky. Not only does it consume a large amount of chakra, but it also puts the user's life at risk. The death rate is extremely high. Of course, all of this was just a small matter for Dustless. Strange. Wasn't I dead? Fugaku, who was in front of him, felt extremely strange, but at the same time, he couldn't help but frown. The person in front of him gave him a feeling. He was and felt. As he felt he was Sploods. He felt Splood. You are. Mikoto, you're awake. Just as Kuroda was about to ask who Dustless was, Uchiha Mikoto woke up and looked at the dark environment in a daze, as if she thought she was in hell. Fugaku, this is... After waking up, Uchiha Mikoto looked at the strange yet familiar world around her. She naively thought that this was the underworld, but after looking around carefully, she realized that this was obviously her home. You are... Her beautiful eyes fell on Dustless, and she felt a sense of kinship. The person in front of her was undoubtedly much older than Itachi. Are you Dustless? It is worth mentioning that the one who spoke first was Fugaku, the one who didn't get along with Dustless the most. He looked at Dustless in disbelief, although his tone was hesitant, but his heart was indescribably sure. This place is no longer suitable for you. Leave Konoha as soon as possible. The Uchiha has become a thing of the past. Dustless's voice gushed out of his throat. His tone was unusually indifferent. It was like he was cut off from the world, and seemed to be incompatible with the world in front of him. All in all, it was an indescribable indifference. Mikoto shed tears of joy. If there was a knot in her heart that couldn't be untied, it was undoubtedly Dustless. I'm sorry, I know these words may be insignificant to you, and it won't make you forgive my mistakes, but it is absolutely sincere. Fugaku's throat rolled, and he choked. His tone was sincere, and his eyes were clear. It was clear that he was serious. 10,000 beasts rise and fall because of fate. My hatred for you is gone with the wind. The reason why I resurrected you is nothing more than to have a clear conscience. You don't have to worry, and you don't have to thank me. Slightly turning his left face, the incomparably clear Rinnegan Sharingan was exposed in front of Fugaku's eyes. Unlike before, after experiencing life and death, Fugaku seemed to understand the most precious thing in life. Although he was surprised by the purple eyes he had never seen before, he didn't show any greed. It seems that he finally understood something. Fugaku's eyes didn't show any greed towards the Rinnegan. Dustless nodded slightly in his heart, reluctantly acknowledging Fugaku. At the same time, his body began to blur, faintly losing its texture. Don't go. Seeing Dustless's body showing signs of collapsing, Mikoto hurriedly turned around, but found that Dustless at this moment was like air, invisible. Even if his figure hadn't completely disappeared, she couldn't catch him. It gave people the feeling that they were in another dimension. Dustless faintly looked at Mikoto's face, some ripples passed through his eyes, and then very indifferently said, "In the future, I will find a place to live in seclusion. Perhaps this will be the last time we meet." He took a deep look at Mikoto and Fugaku, and then his body split apart and turned into thousands of golden rays that gradually disappeared. In the empty room, only Fugaku and his wife were left. Chapter 168. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku looked at each other and saw the bitterness in each other's eyes. It seems that he still can't let go of my past mistakes. Fugaku smiled bitterly, but at the same time he didn't forget to look at Mikoto. Seeing the tears in her eyes, he couldn't help but secretly blame himself and bowed his head in silence. I never prayed for him to forgive me. After a long silence, Fugaku sighed and then said heavily, Mikoto, let's leave Konoha temporarily. There is no Uchiha clan here. But Sasuke is still in Konoha. Mikoto wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. No matter what happened, she loved her child deeply and regarded him as more precious than her own life. Let's leave Sasuke in Konoha. After thinking for a long time, Fugaku said, although it's cruel to Sasuke, he's also living a life of desperation with us. It's safer to stay in Konoha. With Itachi's style of doing things, I think he should have reached an agreement with Konoha and won't hurt Sasuke. However, on the other side, another scene played out. The young Uchiha Sasuke looked at the Uchiha station with horror. Feeling the thick smell of blood in the air, he was so scared that he stepped back again and again with a face full of fear. Especially when he inhaled the air with his nostrils. It was filled with the disgusting smell of blood. This must be an illusion. Boom! Perhaps because of excessive fear, Sasuke didn't realize that there was a stone behind him. He suddenly tripped and fell to the ground. Looking around at the Uchiha's residence, he couldn't accept it for a while. My stupid brother. A ghostly, psychedelic voice was heard. Then a black shadow came into view. The deep, 8 mark on his face was clearly visible, and his whole body exuded an aura of isolation from the world. It was Uchiha Itachi. Brother Itachi. The young Uchiha Sasuke wept with joy. He quickly wiped his tears with his broken arm, and ran towards Uchiha Itachi in a panic, like a little chick falling into the water, with a look of surprise on his face. However, a cold light flashed in Itachi's eyes. Bang! With a sweep of his leg, Uchiha Sasuke, who was jumping happily, was kicked away. The young Sasuke instantly flew backward for more than 10 meters, pulling out an obvious ditch on the ground. Pooh! Sasuke's blood was boiling, and the bones and organs in his body seemed to be dislocated, directly causing him to vomit blood, and his face was pale. His body hurt, but his heart hurt even more. Brother Itachi, do you still not understand? My foolish little brother, everything that's happening before your eyes is because of me. Itachi's cold words combined with his cold eyes. At this moment, Itachi was like a beast breaking out of its cage, biting whoever it caught, giving people a very awe-inspiring feeling. The young Uchiha Sasuke stared blankly at the murderous Uchiha Itachi. For a moment, he forgot all the pain in his body and couldn't feel the slightest pain. There's nothing to be surprised about. Today, you're the only Uchiha. Seeing that Sasuke was scared, Itachi's cold voice was filled with killing intent. The surrounding temperature was forced to drop by dozens of degrees in an instant, pulling the former's thoughts back. Impossible, you must be a fake. Uchiha Sasuke's whole body shivered, and he looked at Uchiha Itachi with hatred. At such a young age, his eyes were as sharp as a beast's. Coupled with his ferocious little face, his appearance was barely good. It seemed that Itachi was his biggest reverse scale, and he couldn't allow others to tarnish it. It's a good look, finally, what a ninja should look like. A slight ripple appeared in Itachi's dead eyes, and he nodded without a trace. However, his brother's optimistic attitude must be taught a lesson. It's not just them. Itachi's eyes looked around, and his emotionless pupils were filled with indifference and disdain for human life. He was very different from the gentle and kind Uchiha Itachi. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's a fake. Even our parents. Speaking of this, Uchiha Itachi's tone changed, and then he looked at Uchiha Sasuke's hostile face. His eyes suddenly turned red, and 3 dark red tomo formed a big pinwheel. Since you don't believe me, then I'll let you relive the scene of your parents being killed, and you standing aside indifferently. Tsukuyomi. As soon as Itachi's voice fell, the world in Sasuke's line of sight also turned upside down. The dark night sky turned crimson, as if it represented Itachi's desperate and dead heart, without any color or sentiment. A huge image suddenly appeared in front of Uchiha Sasuke. It was the scene of Uchiha Itachi killing Uchiha Fugaku and his wife. Through the image in Tsukuyomi's world, Sasuke looked at his parents lying in a pool of blood. Perhaps because of too much grief, Sasuke didn't realize that a special chakra popped up in his mind, slightly stimulating Sasuke's eyes. Have you opened your eyes? Single Tomo Sharingan. Itachi smiled faintly, and at the same time, he stared at Sasuke and said coldly, "It's just a single Tomo Sharingan. It's not worth killing. It seems that I seem to have overestimated you. It's really disappointing. Killing you is tasteless." Looking at the single Tomo in Sasuke's eye socket, Itachi's scarlet eyes turned, revealing a deep big pinwheel Mangekyo Sharingan. "My foolish little brother, if you want to kill me, then hate me, detest me. Then live an ugly life, keep escaping, live an ignoble life. Then, when you have the same eyes as mine, come to me." Chapter 169. Uchiha Itachi looked indifferently at Sasuke's ferocious little face, taking in the hatred on his cheeks. At the same time, sadness flashed in the depths of his eyes. Although this method was a bit cruel, it was the most effective and direct way. "I'll kill you." Uchiha Sasuke jumped up, and his sharp kunai pierced towards Itachi's face. The killing intent in his eyes was as ferocious as a beast's. It seems that betrayal by his closest people has seriously distorted Uchiha Sasuke's physical and mental health. Fragile. Avoiding the oncoming cold light, Uchiha Itachi grabbed Uchiha Sasuke by force and pressed him to the ground like a rabbit, his face full of contempt. "The gap is too big. Now you really don't make me interested in killing you, Sasuke." Uchiha Itachi stepped on Uchiha Sasuke's head expressionlessly, and his breath was restrained. Killing Uchiha Sasuke was just a trivial matter for him. In the Naka shrine of the Uchiha clan, there is a stone tablet that records the history of the Uchiha clan, and also records the truth about the Sharingan. Itachi looked at Uchiha Sasuke under his feet, and wiped out all the humanity in his heart, trying to maintain the coldness he had never had before. "The way to open Mangekyo Sharingan is to kill your own family, and I killed my parents with my own hands, so I got the power beyond Magatama Sharingan," Itachi said incomparably coldly. The coldness floating out of his body was like thousands of years of ice. His tone was extremely serious, full of indifference to the so-called feelings. Especially when he said that he killed his parents. It seemed that he was talking about the most ridiculous thing, and he directly snorted and showed disdain. This made Uchiha Sasuke look at his strange brother, who usually respected his parents the most, in disbelief. "Live on while you're at death's door. For now, I'll temporarily keep you in a cage. When the day comes that you can open the same eyes as mine, I'll kill you." Without looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Itachi passed by him directly. As for Uchiha Sasuke under his feet, he treated him as air, as if he was nothing, like a breeze. Itachi frowned slightly and immediately turned around, revealing half of his indifferent face, and said, "My stupid brother, by the way, let me tell you something. Uchiha Dustless, our big brother, he seems to be alive." Thinking back, Itachi suddenly remembered everything that the Sandaime said. Although it was just a personal guess, there was always some kind of inexplicable feeling in his heart that was pulling him. Impossible, he died many years ago. Uchiha Sasuke roared hysterically at Uchiha Itachi, denying everything about Uchiha Itachi, trying to deny this man's whole life. "Goodbye, my stupid brother." After saying that, without waiting for Uchiha Sasuke to react, Itachi disappeared without a trace. The boundless night sky was particularly bleak. In the vast Uchiha base, only Uchiha Sasuke was left, accompanied by the black night sky and scattered corpses behind him. During this period, Dustless came back again. In order to better fool Uchiha Sasuke, he made two similar corpses to confuse the kid, and it was inevitable that he would notice something. Early the next morning, the news of the Uchiha's annihilation quickly raged through Konoha like a hurricane, and even the whole world. The top clan for hundreds of years was massacred. Like a magnitude 10 earthquake, the whole world trembled. The Uchiha, who used to dominate the world for hundreds of years, was wiped out in a snap of the fingers. No one could remain calm. After all, there were too many unprecedented figures in this super clan. Uchiha Madara was invincible in the world, and then there was Uchiha Dustless. The prestige of the Uchiha was raised to an unprecedented peak period. Now that the entire clan was suddenly destroyed, no one was surprised that it was fake. The major ninja villages sent a large number of spies to Konoha's ninja village to spy on the secrets. However, Konoha didn't disappoint these people. On the same day, they announced that the culprit of the Uchiha's annihilation was Uchiha Itachi, the second son of Uchiha Fugaku. In other words, he was the main culprit who destroyed the Sand Village in the past, the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless. It has to be said that Konoha was particularly sensitive when it came to the Uchiha. The first thing they did was to announce that Uchiha Itachi was an S-class defector, and issued a wanted order to all the ninjas of various countries. They poured all the dirty water on Itachi, making him a scapegoat, while they stayed out of the matter. It can be said that Konoha played the realm of shamelessness incisively and vividly. In the empty godly house, there were few people, and only a few people of different stature were standing side by side. These unknown mysterious people were all wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds, and their aura was cold, giving a very gloomy and oppressive feeling. These people were obviously led by the middle-aged man with orange hair in the middle, and they could clearly see that there were a lot of cold black iron rods inserted in his head. This group of people was, without a doubt, the members of the Akatsuki, and their leader, Pain Tendo. However, Uzumaki Nagato, who controlled Yahiko, became a lot smarter, and he knew that many people were interested in the Rinnegan. He didn't wear the Rinnegan like before, and his pupils looked like normal human eyes. Standing next to Yahiko was Kisame, who was carrying a big sword full of fangs, Sasori and Orochimaru. Obviously, in the past few years, Yahiko had collected a lot of strong people, and they weren't talkative people. They didn't talk to each other, and they didn't talk to each other. The new member is here. The leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, suddenly opened his eyes, and as his voice fell, Uchiha Itachi came into everyone's sight. Chapter 170. Itachi's weak and small figure came into view, as weak as a willow branch. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and Itachi's clothes fluttered in the wind. Especially his sickly pale face. He gave people a feeling of extreme fragility, like a patient who had just recovered from a serious illness, so weak that he couldn't even stand the wind. Seeing this scene, the members of the Akatsuki frowned slightly, including Tendo Pain, and couldn't help but doubt Itachi's strength. The Akatsuki was full of strong people, and all of them were S-class ninjas. Their strength was self-evident. Even if they weren't as strong as the Kages of the other villages, they were almost the same. Placing a sick person in the Akatsuki made everyone question Yahiko's approach. For those who truly knew Itachi, such as Orochimaru, his eyes lit up as he looked at Itachi. He naturally knew that Itachi was the culprit behind the destruction of the Uchiha clan. Moreover, before he defected, Itachi was a genius of the Uchiha clan with the same name as Shursui. There was another important factor that Orochimaru cared about the most. Itachi was the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless. He once teamed up with Dustless to fight against the Rock Village. Naturally, he knew better than anyone how strong Dustless was. At the same time, there were two people who had complicated thoughts. Naturally, it was Yahiko and Kisame, who was defeated by Dustless in the past. Both of them were defeated by Dustless. It was inevitable that they had a special impression of Itachi, Uchiha Dustless's younger brother. He shouldn't be weak. Yahiko took a deep breath and calmed down his complicated emotions. As a defeated opponent of White Dust, he naturally knew how terrifying White Dust could be compared to Kisame, who was defeated in an instant. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Itachi walked straight in, but strangely, the cold wind from before chose to avoid him. Whenever it came in contact with Itachi's hurricane, it would take a detour. Uchiha Itachi, Welcome to the Akatsuki. As the leader of the Akatsuki, Pain naturally took a step forward and welcomed Itachi. However, at any time, any place, any event, there would always be some unexpected characters who would jump out and do unexpected things. Hey, is this guy really suitable to join Akatsuki? Look at his weak and bony appearance. This uncle is very doubtful. Am I right, Kakuzu? An ear-piercing and heroic voice rang out. Raising their heads, they saw a man holding a red 3-section scythe. His face was filled with arrogance as he walked out of the shadows. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he was an extremely arrogant person. It was Fei Duan from the Akatsuki organization. He wore a ring with the word 3 on his finger. Kakuzu's green eyes first fell on Uchiha Itachi. Looking at the expressionless Itachi, his eyes flashed with surprise, and then glanced at Haiden. It has nothing to do with me. If you have any questions, solve them yourself. Ignoring the crazy Haiden, Kakuzu retracted his gaze and put on a look of indifference. His green eyes were vaguely playful. Obviously, he saw Itachi's true strength. This is definitely an unparalleled strong man. It's Haiden. Tendo Pain turned around and looked at Haiden gloomily. His eyes were filled with haze. Just as he was about to scold Haiden not to ask for trouble, Uchiha Itachi's voice sounded. Do you want to try? Itachi's dark and deep eyes fell on the arrogant Haiden. He frowned slightly, and his eyes flashed with indifference. Itachi said, the gap between us is too big. Judging from your weapon, you should be a strength-type ninja. That's not bad. However, we are not in the same dimension. Staring at the 3-section scythe on Haiden's shoulder, Itachi said softly with some persuasion. He was good at genjutsu, and Haiden was good at taijutsu. This type of ninja is generally very poor in defense of genjutsu. In that case, let me show you the power of Master Haiden. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and Haiden took the scythe off his shoulder. The weapon that weighed thousands of pounds was like a toy in his hand. It was dazzling to play with, and he seemed to be extremely skilled. Sure enough, it's an unusual organization. There are all kinds of people. No wonder Sandaime Hokage said that the people who attacked Konoha a few years ago may be related to people in this organization. Itachi's eyes swept over several people in the Akatsuki organization. Especially when he saw Orochimaru, his heart fell to the bottom. Even Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, can join the Akatsuki organization. It can also be seen that the Akatsuki is extraordinary. What Itachi cared about most was that the so-called leader was inserted with black iron rods all over his body. He was cold all over, and there was no sign of life. Obviously, he was like a puppet. Let me teach you a lesson on behalf of the leader, and let you know what it means to respect the old and love the young. A newcomer should know the rules that newcomers should know. With a ferocious face, Haiden rushed over, but his speed was still very slow, at least in Itachi's eyes. At the moment, his dark eyes just stared at Haiden without fear. The deep 3 tomo were like blood-red gems inlaid in his pupils, flashing with a strange luster. What a powerful eye power, worthy of being Dustless's younger brother. Orochimaru looked at Itachi's pupils with blazing eyes, and his heart was burning with excitement. Especially at the moment when the 3 tomo flashed, his heart was in his throat, and he almost danced with joy. The covetousness and eagerness in his eyes were undisguised. It was precisely because he had seen the power of Dustless's Sharingan that Orochimaru would be so persistent in his pursuit of the Sharingan. Damn, what's going on? Haiden's angry voice exploded, and his eyes swept over. Itachi's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and his body couldn't move. It seemed that he was forcibly imprisoned. His eyes were full of dark red flames, and his 3 tomo Sharingan was staring. Chapter 171. Haiden's abnormality naturally fell into everyone's eyes. Immediately, the line of sight of everyone in Akatsuki organization was drawn over. Looking at Haiden, who was unable to budge, his 4 limbs seemed to be fixed. They frowned one after another, and some of them even frowned. This Uchiha Itachi's genjutsu attainment is really terrifying. He just glanced at Haiden, and made him unable to move. What a terrifying man. He deserves to be the younger brother of Uchiha Wuchin. Sure enough, he's not an ordinary person. Tendo Pain looked at Uchiha Itachi in surprise, and then looked at Haiden, who couldn't move even after using all his strength. He couldn't help but nod secretly, and was very satisfied with Uchiha Itachi's performance. As for the trapped Haiden, he can only blame himself for being the first bird. I must get the Sharingan. Compared with the other members of the organization who were simply surprised, Orochimaru's heart was as clear as a mirror. He was much clearer that this was just a 3-tomo Sharingan, and he needed a higher level of Manjikyu Sharingan. Since he defected from Konoha, due to the fact that he teamed up with Dustless during the period, he was influenced by Dustless's dojutsu. He has always been eager to get the Sharingan of Uchiha, even to a state of madness. He would do anything for the Sharingan, especially since Uchiha Itachi was the younger brother of the former Uchiha Dustless. This identity attracted Orochimaru's attention even more. This is a good opportunity. Orochimaru's eyes scattered quietly. Seeing that everyone was still immersed in the strangeness of the Sharingan, Orochimaru laughed secretly. Of course, he wouldn't choose to attack Uchiha Itachi now, because all the members of the Akatsuki were here. I'm afraid that only a top powerhouse like the first Hokage could leave safely under the siege of the Akatsuki. Orochimaru still understood this point. Let me go if you have the guts, and let Uncle Haiden teach you how to be a man. Flying Duan, who had been trying to break free from the illusion for a long time without success, had a livid expression on his face. It was as ugly as a black pot that had been burning for thousands of years. Coupled with his fiendish appearance and the crimson 3-part scythe in his hand, he gave off the feeling of a grim reaper on earth. Looking at Itachi's calm face, Haiden's eyes were twitching, and he immediately looked at Kakuzu, who had a playful smile on his face, and he was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Why aren't you coming over to help? We're on the same team. We're bound together for good or ill. If I lose, you'll lose face too. Haiden shouted at Kakuzu, and at the same time, he couldn't help cursing Kakuzu in his heart. They were teammates. They should help each other, instead of watching. This. Hearing this, Kakuzu looked hesitant. Although he was quite afraid of Itachi, but with Haiden, even if they can't defeat him, they can still deal with him. Especially as Haiden said, they are on the same team. If Haiden is unlucky, then Kakuzu won't have a good ending. And Haiden is usually quite good, although his behavior is a bit unreliable, but at the critical moment he can be trusted. Stop, Itachi. Seeing that Kakuzu wanted to help, Yahiko slightly frowned, waved his hand and said with a firm tone. At the same time, there was a hint of warning in his voice. Whether it is Uchiha Itachi, Kakuzu, or Haiden, if they dare to challenge his authority, they will definitely not have a good ending. Got it? Uchiha Itachi nodded. Then he removed the genjutsu binding Haiden, and stood in the same place without any expression, carefully looking at the members of Akatsuki. His task is to investigate the Akatsuki, and at the same time, to find out whether the masked man who attacked Konoha was the one who controlled the Akatsuki. At least you know what's good for you. If there's a next time, Master Fei Duan will definitely not forgive you. Hearing Yahiko's words, Haiden could only snort and glare fiercely at Itachi. His mood was particularly gloomy. Not only did he not find any sense of superiority, but he was also humiliated by Itachi. Although he couldn't wait to beat Itachi, Haiden didn't dare to disobey Yahiko's order. As Conan said before, Yahiko has the absolute right to speak in the Akatsuki, and his order is equivalent to the command of God. Welcome to the Akatsuki, Itachi. Your code name is Suzaku, and this is your clothes and ring. After throwing the black uniform and the ring with the word Suzaku to Itachi, Yahiko looked around and said with a long tone, "The people in the organization have been gathered, and from now on, Itachi and Kisame will perform the task together." Kisame stared at Itachi, and to be honest, he really felt that it was ridiculous to team up with Dustless's younger brother. He even felt that he was dreaming, a very unrealistic dream. After all, Dustless defeated him in May. If Dustless didn't deliberately let them go, it's likely that they would have died many years ago, not to mention teaming up with Uchiha Itachi. From now on we will be a team. Kisame walked to Itachi's side. He was much stronger than Itachi, and the height of the two soon formed a contrast, and Itachi didn't look worth mentioning. I hope we can get along well in the future. Looking at Itachi, who was shorter than him and much thinner, Kisame said seriously and showed a kind smile. Although it looked strange with his shark face, it was sincere. At that time, Uchiha Wuchin didn't look as tall as Itachi, but he crushed him with his godlike strength. It was like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. I hope so too. Hearing this, Itachi nodded. He could feel that Kisame's words were from the bottom of his heart, and there was no falsehood in his words. He also felt that Kisame gave him a good feeling. For a moment, the two felt a sense of appreciation for each other. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.